My wife texted from her girls' trip. Accidentally slept with my ex. We're getting back together, and I am keeping the ring for future. I replied, thanks. Then I emailed the $87,000 ring bill, which was in her name, and then Thursday night, 11:23 p.m., and I was exactly where any self-respecting 29-year-old man should be on a random weeknight, planted on my couch in boxers and a Nirvana t-shirt I'd been wearing since Tuesday, absolutely demolishing some kid from Portugal in FIFA Ultimate Team. The score was 4-1, my favor, and I just pulled off this absolutely disgusting finesse shot with Mbappe that curved like it had GPS tracking. The kid rage quit before I could even watch the replay, which honestly was the most satisfying part of my entire week. My wife Sabrina had been gone for 5 days on what she called a much-needed girls' trip to Miami, which apparently involved a lot of poolside selfies, overpriced cocktails with names I couldn't pronounce, and her college friends pretending they still had the metabolism of 21-year-olds. I wasn't complaining, though. I'd been living like a feral bachelor, eating cereal straight from the box, leaving dishes in the sink overnight without getting a passive-aggressive lecture about our shared space, and falling asleep to ESPN without someone sighing dramatically every 15 minutes. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient stadium noise from the TV and the occasional honking from the street below our downtown condo. I was in that perfect zone of existence where nothing hurts, nothing matters, and you're just vibing with artificial crowd sounds and the glow of a 65-inch screen. Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table, dancing across a stack of unopened mail and an empty bag of Cool Ranch Doritos. I figured it was probably Sabrina sending another group photo with her friends doing that awkward, "we're having so much fun" pose that women do when they're 3 margaritas deep and trying to prove something to Instagram. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick it up. Maybe instinct, maybe boredom, maybe the universe deciding it was time to hit me with a plot twist I absolutely did not order. The text was from Sabrina, and the preview on my lock screen just said, "Hey babe, this is super awkward LOL." I unlocked my phone with my thumbprint, and that's when my Thursday night officially upgraded from chill to what in the actual hell. The full message read, "Hey babe, this is super awkward LOL. But I ran into my ex, Travis. We accidentally slept together. I realized I'm not over him. We're getting back together. Sorry this is so last minute." I sat there staring at the screen like my brain was a Windows 95 computer trying to load a 4K video. The little dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. She was typing more, which somehow made it worse. The follow-up message came through like a freight train of audacity. "By the way, I'm keeping the ring. It's a clean break gift. I'll use it for my future with Travis. Don't contact me." I read it once, then twice, then a third time, just to make absolutely certain I wasn't having a stroke or hallucinating from too many energy drinks. Accidentally slept together. Those 3 words kept bouncing around my skull like a DVD screensaver. What kind of gymnastics do you have to do to accidentally sleep with someone? Did she trip on a margarita-soaked pool deck and fall directly onto his? No, you know what? I wasn't even going to finish that thought. And clean break gift. Was that even a thing? Did Hallmark make a card for that? Congratulations on your divorce. Here's a ridiculously expensive ring I'm stealing. Best wishes, go screw yourself. The sheer nerve, the unbelievable confidence it took to text your husband that you cheated, you're leaving, and oh by the way, you're keeping the engagement ring like it's a parting gift from a game show. I almost had to respect the hustle. Almost. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I could have written a novel. I could have sent paragraph after paragraph about betrayal, about the 3 years we'd been together, about the wedding we'd been planning for 8 months that was supposed to happen in 6 weeks. I could have asked her if she'd lost her mind somewhere between the hotel minibar and whatever terrible decision-making led to this moment. I could have called her every name in the book and then invented a few new ones. But instead, I took a deep breath, channeled every ounce of petty energy I had in my body, and typed one single word, "Thanks." No punctuation, no elaboration. Just, "Thanks," like she'd just told me she grabbed milk from the store. I hit send and watched the little delivered notification pop up underneath it. Then I just sat there in the eerie quiet of my living room with the FIFA menu music looping in the background. That annoying upbeat electronic garbage that's designed to make you feel like you're always one game away from glory. The TV screen had gone into idle mode, showing my poorly customized avatar standing in the digital stadium looking way more confident than I felt. My beer was getting warm on the coffee table next to a pile of fantasy football magazines I'd been meaning to read. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 15 minutes ago, but somehow the entire molecular structure of my life had shifted. I realized I wasn't crying. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even particularly angry, which was the weirdest part. I was just sitting there in my 2-day-old shirt, holding my phone, feeling this bizarre sense of clarity wash over me like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I'd been stumbling around in for months. Sabrina and I hadn't been good in a while. I knew that. She knew that. Probably our mailman knew that from the way we'd barely acknowledged each other in the elevator for the past few weeks. But we'd been going through the motions, doing the whole we're fine performance for our families and friends, planning a wedding that felt more like a corporate merger than a celebration. She'd been obsessed with Pinterest boards and seating charts while I'd been wondering why I felt more excited about my Tuesday night basketball league than about marrying someone I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with. Still, there's knowing something's wrong, and then there's getting a text that your wife accidentally mounted her ex-boyfriend like he was a Peloton bike she forgot to cancel the subscription for. The silence in the apartment was thick, almost physical, like I could reach out and touch it. It was the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat and wonder if you're having an appropriate reaction to your marriage spontaneously combusting via text message. Somewhere in the building, someone's dog was barking. A siren wailed past on the street below. My phone buzzed again, probably her blocking my number, but I didn't even look. I just sat there, controller in one hand, beer in the other, and let the weight of it all settle on my shoulders like the world's most unwelcome blanket. And weirdly, underneath the shock and the absurdity and the sheer what the hell just happened of it all, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Free. The thing about getting dumped via text by your wife, who's currently banging her ex in a Miami hotel, is that it gives you this weird superpower, clarity. Suddenly, all those little financial details you'd been ignoring because happy wife, happy life, or whatever bumper sticker wisdom you'd been operating under just come flooding back with crystal clear precision. I sat there on my couch for maybe another 10 minutes, letting the reality marinate, and then something clicked in my brain like a light switch being flipped by a very petty electrician. That ring. That goddamn ring she was planning to wear while building her future with Travis, like it was some kind of romantic heirloom instead of what it actually was, an $87,000 debt bomb with my name all over the payments. Let me back up and paint you the full picture of this financial disaster, because it's honestly a masterpiece of bad decisions and male stupidity. 6 months ago, Sabrina had dragged me to this boutique jewelry place in the fancy part of downtown, the kind of place where they buzz you in like you're entering a bank vault and immediately offer you espresso from a machine that probably costs more than my car. The jeweler, this guy named Marcus who wore more rings than Johnny Depp and had an accent I couldn't quite place but screamed, "I'm going to separate you from your money with European charm," sat us down at a glass table and started pulling out diamonds like he was dealing cards at a very expensive poker game. Sabrina's eyes lit up like a kid in a candy store, except this candy store sold compressed carbon for the price of a decent used BMW. She'd done her research too, which should have been my first red flag. She had screenshots on her phone, printouts from wedding blogs, and a whole folder of inspiration that basically translated to, "I want something that will make my college friends feel inadequate on Instagram." She kept using words like clarity and cut quality and statement piece, which I now realize was code for financially irresponsible flex. We're talking about a 3.7 carat diamond, custom designed in some setting that Marcus assured us was very modern, very investment worthy, which is jewelry speak for, "You're about to pay double what this is worth." The price tag made my stomach drop like I was on a roller coaster. But Sabrina had this look in her eyes, that mix of desire and determination that I'd learned over 3 years meant I was going to lose this argument before it even started. Here's where it gets really good, though, and by good, I mean spectacularly stupid on my part. Sabrina insisted on opening the jeweler's credit line in her name. She sold it to me as this genius financial move, talking about how it would boost her luxury credit profile for future big purchases, how it would diversify her credit mix, How all the influencers and financial advisors she followed on TikTok said this was smart money management. I, being the supportive fiancé who was trying really hard to be the kind of modern husband who doesn't control his partner's financial decisions, said sure, whatever makes you happy. What I didn't fully process at the time was that while her name was on the credit agreement, I was the one who set up automatic monthly payments of $2,900 from my checking account to hers, which she would then use to pay down the balance. It was this convoluted system that made zero sense, but she'd explained it with enough confidence that I just nodded along like an idiot. So now, sitting in my living room at almost midnight, still wearing my crusty Nirvana shirt and experiencing what I can only describe as an out-of-body level of spite, I opened my laptop. The blue light illuminated my face like I was a hacker in a bad movie, except instead of breaking into government databases, I was about to perform some financial surgery that would have made my accountant father actually proud of me for once. I logged into my bank account, navigated to the recurring payments section, and found that beautiful $2,900 monthly transfer scheduled to go out in 3 days. My mouse hovered over the cancel button for exactly 2 seconds before I clicked it with the kind of satisfaction usually reserved for popping bubble wrap or crushing an empty beer can. Canceled. Done. Finito. That's $2,900 a month that could now go toward literally anything else. Therapy, a new gaming setup, hiring a skywriter to spell out, Travis is getting an $87,000 surprise over Miami Beach. But I wasn't done. Oh no. I was just getting warmed up. I opened my email and found the most recent statement from the jeweler that had been forwarded to me back when Sabrina and I were still pretending to be a functional couple. The balance sat at exactly $87,000. She'd made exactly one payment, apparently, before deciding that was enough effort. I downloaded the PDF, opened a new email, and addressed it to Sabrina's Gmail account, the one she used for all her personal business, which apparently now included cheating and grand larceny. The subject line practically wrote itself, per your text. In the body, I kept it simple and devastating. This is all yours now. Thanks. Then I attached that invoice like I was serving her legal papers, which, let's be honest, I basically was. My finger hit send with the force of a judge's gavel, and I watched that email whoosh into the digital void, headed straight for Miami, and whatever hotel room she was probably still in, probably scrolling through Travis's Instagram, trying to convince herself she'd made a good life choice. The petty energy was flowing through me now like I'd mainlined espresso and spite in equal measure. I pulled up the smart lock app for our condo and changed the entry code from the one we'd been using, her birthday, because of course it was, to a random string of numbers I'd have to write down to remember. Changed. Locked out. She wanted a clean break? Here's the cleanest break possible. No way to get back in even if she changed her mind between mojitos. Next up was the divorce lawyer, and luckily I had one on speed dial. Well, not literally speed dial, but saved in my contacts from when my buddy Marcus, different Marcus, not the jewelry thief, had his whole got married in Vegas to a bottle service girl and needed an annulment incident last year. I fired off an email at 12:47 a.m. explaining my situation in the most professional terms I could manage while still riding high on my revenge tour, and asked for a consultation as soon as possible, preferably before Sabrina realized what was happening and tried to lawyer up first. Then came the wedding vendors, and let me tell you, there's something deeply cathartic about canceling a wedding at 1 in the morning while eating stale Doritos and riding the world's most justified anger high. I'd saved all the contracts in a folder labeled Wedding Stuff that I now wished I could rename Expensive Mistakes and Broken Dreams, but I settled for just opening each one and finding the cancellation clauses. The venue. Canceled, lost the $5,000 deposit, but honestly worth it to not have to stand at an altar and pretend everything was fine. The photographer who charged $4,000 and acted like she was doing us a favor. Canceled. The DJ, the florist, the overpriced catering company that wanted $85 per person for chicken that probably came from Costco. Canceled, canceled, canceled. Each email I sent felt like dropping weight off my shoulders, like I was literally deleting the future we'd been planning and replacing it with blessed nothing. By 2 a.m., I was running on fumes and spite, but there was one last thing sitting on my kitchen counter that needed to be dealt with: a box of wedding invitations. Not just any invitations, mind you, but the custom-designed, letterpress, ivory cardstock with gold foil invitations that Sabrina had insisted were essential for setting the right tone. These things cost $1,700 for 150 invites, which broke down to over $11 per piece of paper, basically telling people to show up and watch us lie to each other. I picked up that beautiful, expensive box, walked to the trash chute in the hallway, and dumped the whole thing down like I was scattering ashes at sea, except way less sentimental and way more satisfying. I stood there for a second, listening to them tumble down 4 floors to the dumpster below, and smiled for the first time in hours. Somewhere in Miami, Sabrina was sleeping next to Travis. And somewhere in my downtown condo, I was finally free. For 5 glorious days, I lived like a man who'd just been released from a prison I didn't even know I was in. I'm talking pure, unadulterated freedom. The kind of existence where you wake up at noon on a Saturday not because you're depressed, but because you genuinely have nothing to do and nowhere to be and no one to judge you for it. I drank my coffee black at 3 in the afternoon, left the toilet seat up without consequences, and discovered that my apartment could actually be quiet instead of filled with reality TV noise and the constant hum of Sabrina's anxiety about whether we were living our best life, or whatever phrase she'd picked up from her influencer friends that week. I ordered Chinese food at midnight just because I could, left the containers on the counter until morning, and no one materialized to give me a lecture about ants or maintaining our space like adults. I deep cleaned my side of the closet and discovered I actually had way more room without Sabrina's 73 pairs of shoes that all looked identical to me, but apparently served very different purposes according to her. I found shirts I'd forgotten I owned, a favorite hoodie that had mysteriously disappeared 6 months ago when she declared we were dressing more mature now, and about $40 in random pockets from various jackets I hadn't worn since she started picking out my outfits. I played guitar for the first time in probably a year, working through old John Mayer riffs and not worrying about someone sighing dramatically from the other room about how the noise was interfering with her decompression time. I made eggs for dinner, just eggs, nothing else, scrambled with too much butter and hot sauce, and ate them standing at the counter while watching YouTube videos about conspiracy theories. It was glorious. It was peaceful. It was exactly the kind of existence that makes you realize you'd been living in low-key misery for longer than you wanted to admit. My buddy Jake came over on day 3 with a case of beer and a pizza from this place we used to hit up in college, back before Sabrina had declared that carbs after 7 p.m. were basically poison, and that we needed to be more conscious about our food choices. We sat on my couch, watched an entire baseball game without anyone asking if we could please watch something with a plot. And he didn't ask a single question about Sabrina or Travis or the text message that had blown up my life. He just showed up, cracked open a Budweiser, and said, "Dude, your apartment feels different. Like, less tense or something." That was it. That was the whole conversation, and it was perfect. We didn't need to process or analyze or talk about our feelings like we were in some kind of male therapy session. We just existed in comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional commentary about terrible umpire calls and whether the Cubs would ever get their act together. I slept like a rock for the first time in months, sprawled diagonally across the bed, without someone complaining that I was invading her space, or that my snoring was preventing her from achieving proper REM sleep. I woke up naturally, without an alarm, and spent 20 minutes just lying there staring at the ceiling, thinking about absolutely nothing. I went to the gym and actually enjoyed it instead of treating it like a chore I had to complete so Sabrina wouldn't make comments about how we needed to stay in shape for the wedding photos. I ate cereal for dinner 2 nights in a row, Cinnamon Toast Crunch straight from the box, standing in front of the open fridge, living my best feral bachelor life. And nobody was there to judge me or suggest we meal prep quinoa bowls for the week like responsible adults. But all good things, as they say, must come to an end. And my peaceful little post-breakup vacation came crashing down on Tuesday afternoon when my phone started blowing up like I'd won the lottery, except instead of money, I'd won the grand prize of other people's audacity and entitlement. It started with a voicemail from Trina, Sabrina's maid of honor and partner in crime. One of those women who refers to herself as a girl's girl, but is really just an enabler of bad behavior wrapped in a Forever 21 bodycon dress. I was at the grocery store, standing in the chip aisle trying to decide between Cool Ranch and Nacho Cheese Doritos, a decision that felt monumentally important in my new simple life, when I saw I'd missed a call. I put the phone on speaker and hit play, fully expecting it to be a spam call about my car's extended warranty, but instead, I got Trina's voice dripping with that particular brand of fake concern that women use when they're about to ask you for something unreasonable. "Hey Noah," she started, using that overly familiar tone like we were best friends instead of people who'd been forced into proximity by my soon-to-be ex-wife. "So, Sab's card got declined at dinner last night." "Yeah, super awkward. We were at this really nice place on Ocean Drive, and her Amex just didn't work. And then she got some weird email from the jeweler about a missed payment or something." There was a pause where I could literally hear her chewing gum and probably checking her reflection in a compact mirror. "Can you just, fix it? She's really embarrassed, and she doesn't want to call you directly because things are weird right now. But it's just a technical thing, right? Just log in and move some money around, or whatever you need to do." "Thanks, babe." She actually called me babe. The woman who'd helped my wife cheat on me just called me babe and asked me to fix a financial problem that was entirely of Sabrina's own making. I stood there in the Doritos aisle, holding my phone like it was a live grenade, while some mom with 2 screaming kids in her cart navigated around me and shot me a look that said move or die. I replayed the message just to make sure I'd heard it correctly. And yep, Trina had really just asked me to fix the fact that I'd stopped paying for the ring that my cheating wife was planning to wear while building a future with another man. The sheer entitlement, the absolute lack of self-awareness, the confidence it took to leave that voicemail without apparently seeing any irony in the situation. It was almost impressive. Almost. I deleted the message without responding, grabbed both bags of Doritos because screw choosing, and headed to the checkout line, already bracing myself for whatever fresh hell was coming next. And come it did, about 3 hours later, right as I was settling into a dinner of leftover pizza and a beer. My phone rang with a number I recognized immediately because it had been programmed into my contacts with the label Patricia, Danger. That would be Sabrina's mom, Patricia Morrison, a woman who'd perfected the art of passive-aggressive warfare and could make you feel guilty for things you didn't even do. She was one of those mothers who still called her 30-year-old daughter my baby and treated every boyfriend or husband like a temporary employee who was probably going to be fired soon. I let it ring twice while debating whether answering would be worth the entertainment value, then figured what the hell, might as well see how deep this rabbit hole goes. "Noah," she said without preamble, her voice carrying that particular tone that wealthy white women use when they're about to lecture someone they consider beneath them. "We need to discuss this situation with Sabrina's ring payment." She called me absolutely distraught, darling. Distraught. She said you forgot to make the payment, and now her credit score is going to be affected. She said forgot, like it was a genuine possibility, like I was some kind of absent-minded professor who'd just overlooked a minor detail rather than a man who'd been cheated on and deliberately cut off payments to a debt that wasn't his responsibility. I took a long pull from my beer, savoring the moment before I responded. "Patricia, I didn't forget anything. Sabrina left me, via text, to get back together with her ex. She explicitly said she was keeping the ring. So the ring, and all financial obligations attached to it, are now exclusively her problem." I kept my voice even, professional almost, like I was explaining a business transaction rather than the collapse of a marriage. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, the kind of sound people make when they're not used to being contradicted. "You can't just stop paying, Noah. That's punishing her for a mistake. My daughter made a mistake, and you're being vindictive and small about it." Her voice had risen about 2 octaves, and I could practically see her clutching her pearls in whatever overpriced yoga outfit she was probably wearing. "A mistake," I repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air between us. "Patricia, she didn't accidentally leave her phone in an Uber. She bought plane tickets to Miami, checked into a hotel, reconnected with her ex-boyfriend, slept with him, multiple times, I'm assuming, since this resulted in them getting back together, and then sent me a text message ending our marriage. That's not a mistake. That's not even a series of mistakes. That's an itinerary. That's a planned event with multiple decision points where she could have, not done that." The silence on the other end was beautiful, like I could hear her brain short-circuiting as she tried to figure out how to spin this into somehow being my fault. Well, she finally sputtered. You must have driven her to it somehow. Sabrina wouldn't just. People don't just. She couldn't even finish the sentence, too caught up in her delusion that her precious daughter was somehow the victim in this scenario. There's nothing to fix here, Patricia, I said, finishing my beer and tossing the bottle toward the recycling bin. Sabrina made her choices. She can live with the consequences. Have a great evening. And I hung up, powered off my phone, and sat there in my peaceful, drama-free apartment, knowing damn well this was just the beginning. I'd made it exactly 72 hours past the Patricia phone call before the universe decided that peace was overrated and I needed more chaos in my life. It was Friday evening, around 8 p.m., and I was doing what any reasonable newly single man does on a Friday night. Absolutely nothing productive. I'd ordered Thai food, cracked open my third beer of the evening, and was halfway through a documentary about some guy who climbed Mount Everest without oxygen, which seemed like a reasonable metaphor for my current life situation. My phone had been blissfully quiet all day after I'd blocked about 15 numbers including Trina, Patricia, and a few other members of Sabrina's entourage who apparently thought they had any business in my life. I was in that perfect zone of relaxation where your brain finally stops running through all the terrible scenarios and just lets you enjoy pad thai and other people's bad decisions. Then the intercom buzzed. Not a polite single buzz either, but that aggressive, repeated buzzing that means someone downstairs is leaning on the button like they're trying to trigger a fire alarm. I paused the documentary. The guy was literally about to summit, rude timing, and walked over to the intercom panel by my door, already knowing in my gut that my peaceful evening was about to get spectacularly ruined. I pressed the talk button, and before I could even say hello, Sabrina's voice came screaming through the speaker at a volume that probably violated noise ordinances. Noah, open the goddamn door. The code doesn't work. I know you're up there. Your car is in the garage. Stop being petty and let me in. I need to get my things. Her voice had that particular quality of someone who's used to getting their way through sheer volume and persistence, and I could hear traffic noise in the background along with what sounded like someone else saying something I couldn't quite make out. I looked at the intercom like it was a snake that had just appeared in my kitchen, took a deep breath, and pressed the talk button again. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice conversational and calm, which I knew would irritate her more than yelling back. The code doesn't work because I changed it. And that's intentional. You texted me that you weren't coming back. You said don't contact you. So I'm respecting your wishes and maintaining my boundaries. I said boundaries like I'd been watching therapy TikToks, which honestly I had been. There's some solid content out there about dealing with narcissists, and it was proving very educational. You can't just lock me out of my own home, she shrieked, and I could practically see her face turning red, that vein in her forehead popping out that always appeared when she didn't get her way. I have rights. I live here. This is illegal. I'm calling the police. And then the intercom went silent as she apparently hung up or stormed away or both. I stood there for a second, shrugged, and went back to my couch. If she wanted to call the cops, let her. I had the deed to the condo in my name only. I had her text message saying she was leaving, and I had a really good documentary to finish. The guy still had to get down the mountain, which statistically is when most people die, and I was invested in his survival. I got about 30 minutes of peace. The guy made it down alive, spoiler alert, though he lost some toes to frostbite, which seemed like a reasonable trade-off for bragging rights, before there was a knock on my door. Not the intercom this time, an actual knock, and it had that particular authoritative quality that meant this wasn't the delivery guy with my Thai food leftovers. I looked through the peephole, and sure enough, there were two uniformed police officers standing in my hallway, and behind them I could see Sabrina with mascara-streaked cheeks doing her best impression of a damsel in distress, and next to her, some guy I assumed was the infamous Travis, looking exactly like every ex-boyfriend named Travis looks. Backwards baseball cap, tight t-shirt showing off gym muscles, and that particular expression of confused aggression that men get when they're in over their heads, but too proud to admit it. I opened the door, and immediately the older of the two cops, a black guy probably in his late 40s with tired eyes that said he'd seen way too much stupid stuff in his career, held up his hand in a gesture that was both greeting and caution. Evening, sir. I'm Officer Williams. This is Officer Chen. We got a call about an illegal eviction? Ma'am says you changed the locks and won't let her access her residence. He said it in that carefully neutral tone that cops use when they're already pretty sure the call is bullshit, but have to go through the motions anyway. Officers, I said, nodding politely and stepping aside so they could see into my apartment. One dude, one couch, one TV, 0 women's belongings anywhere in sight. Come in. I can explain the situation, and I have documentation. I said documentation like I was a lawyer, which I wasn't, but I'd learned from enough true crime podcasts that having paperwork makes you look credible. Behind the cops, Sabrina made a move to follow them inside, and Officer Williams held up his hand again without even looking back. Ma'am, please wait in the hallway for a moment. His tone suggested this wasn't a request, and Sabrina's mouth dropped open like she couldn't believe she was being excluded from her own victimhood narrative. Travis put his hand on her shoulder in what I guess was supposed to be a supportive gesture, but mostly just made him look like a guy who was starting to realize he'd signed up for way more drama than he'd bargained for when he decided to sleep with his ex-girlfriend in Miami. I grabbed the folder I'd prepared, because yes, I'd actually prepared a folder once I'd canceled all those wedding vendors. I wasn't completely naive about how this might go down, and handed Officer Williams the deed to the condo. The property is solely in my name. I bought it 2 years ago, before Sabrina and I got married. She never contributed to the mortgage, never paid utilities. Her name isn't on any documentation related to this address. I watched him flip through the pages, his partner Officer Chen looking over his shoulder, both of them doing that thing cops do, where their faces don't reveal anything they're thinking. Okay, Williams said slowly. But if she's been living here, even without her name on the deed, she may have established tenancy, which means you can't just. He started to explain, probably gearing up for the standard tenant rights speech, and I held up my phone, which I'd been smart enough to screenshot every message from that Thursday night before Sabrina could delete anything or claim it never happened. She sent me this text 5 days ago, I said, pulling up the screenshots and handing him my phone. She explicitly states she's leaving me, getting back together with her ex. That would be the guy in the hallway with the unfortunate facial hair situation, and that I shouldn't contact her. She voluntarily left the residence and communicated in writing that she wasn't coming back. She removed herself from tenancy. I was pulling out phrases I'd learned from a 30-minute YouTube video about tenant law that I'd watched at 2 in the morning earlier in the week, and honestly, it was paying off. Officer Williams read the text message once, then again, then looked up at me with an expression that might have been sympathy, or might have been amusement, or might have been both. She really wrote accidentally slept together, he asked, and I saw the corner of his mouth twitch like he was trying not to smile. Officer Chen leaned in to read it too, and I watched her eyebrows go up so high they almost disappeared into her hairline. Yep, I said, accidentally. Like she tripped and fell into a romantic reconciliation in Miami. These things happen, apparently. I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice, and honestly, I didn't try very hard. Officer Williams handed me back my phone and walked to the door, opening it to where Sabrina and Travis were huddled in the hallway, trying to look pitiful and failing miserably because Sabrina was wearing Gucci sneakers and Travis was checking his phone like he had somewhere better to be. Ma'am, Officer Williams said, his voice taking on that firm quality that meant the conversation was basically over. Your husband has shown me documentation proving sole ownership of this property. And he's shown me text messages where you explicitly state you're leaving the relationship and not coming back. This clearly indicates voluntary abandonment of the residence. This is not an illegal eviction. This is a domestic matter that you'll need to resolve through the appropriate legal channels, meaning divorce court, not the police department. Sabrina's face went through about 5 different expressions in rapid succession: shock, anger, disbelief, more anger, and then this calculating look that I recognized as her. I'm about to say something I think is really clever face. But before she could launch into whatever speech she'd prepared, Travis, sweet, stupid Travis, decided this was his moment to be a hero. He stepped forward, puffing out his chest like a rooster about to fight, and pointed at Sabrina's hand where that massive diamond was catching the hallway light and probably blinding passing airplanes. Wait a minute, Travis said, his voice cracking slightly like he was going through puberty again. She's wearing an $87,000 ring. He gave it to her, and now he's trying to steal it back. That's theft. That's actual theft. You should arrest him. He looked so proud of himself, like he'd just solved a murder case, and I watched both cops turn to look at him with expressions that suggested they were reconsidering their career choices. Officer Chun, who hadn't said much up to this point, looked at Travis, then at Sabrina's hand where the ring was indeed very much present, then back at Travis. "Sir," she said slowly, like she was explaining something to a particularly dim child. "She's wearing it. Right now? On her finger. He's not trying to steal it. It's literally on her hand." The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife, and I watched Travis's face go through its own journey of realization as he understood that he'd just made himself look like an absolute moron in front of two police officers and his new old girlfriend. The smug, heroic expression slid off Travis's face faster than a cheap air mattress deflating after someone sat on it too hard, replaced by this red-faced embarrassment that almost made me feel bad for him. Almost. Officer Williams sighed the kind of sigh that suggested this wasn't even close to the dumbest call he'd responded to that week, looked at me, and nodded. "You folks have a good evening." "Ma'am, sir, I suggest you handle your personal business through a lawyer, not through the police department." And with that, both officers turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving Sabrina, Travis, and me standing in the most awkward triangle formation imaginable. Sabrina looked like she wanted to say something, her mouth opening and closing, but apparently even she couldn't find words for this particular disaster. I gave them both a small wave, stepped back into my apartment, and closed the door, finally getting back to my now cold Thai food and my peaceful Friday night. I thought after the cop incident that maybe, just maybe, Sabrina would take the hint and handle things through proper legal channels like a normal adult human being going through a divorce. I thought wrong. Because apparently when you're the kind of person who accidentally sleeps with your ex and then tries to keep an $87,000 ring like it's a participation trophy, you're also the kind of person who thinks rules and social norms are more like gentle suggestions that don't really apply to you. I discovered this delightful personality trait exactly 1 week after the police visit, when I went down to check my mail and found my mailbox absolutely exploding with correspondence like it was Christmas morning at a hoarder's house. I'm talking stuff to the point where the little metal door wouldn't even close properly, with envelopes and catalogs and various pieces of mail jammed in there at impossible angles like someone had been playing Tetris with my postal delivery. I stood there in the lobby of my building at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd taken the week off work because my boss had taken one look at my face when I explained the situation and said, "Go home, figure your life out. We'll see you when you're ready," and just stared at this explosion of paper products wondering what fresh hell had manifested overnight. I started pulling stuff out, and immediately my confusion turned into that very specific kind of anger that comes when you realize someone is actively trying to screw you over in a new and creative way. Neiman Marcus catalog. Addressed to Sabrina Morrison, my address. Sephora VIP member magazine. Sabrina Morrison, my address. Restoration hardware furniture porn. Sorry, I mean catalog. Sabrina Morrison, my address. Then the real fun stuff started showing up. A late payment notice from American Express, a credit alert from Experian, a reminder about an overdue balance from Nordstrom, and my personal favorite, a collections notice from the jewelry company that was apparently not thrilled about the $87,000 ghost payment situation. Every single piece of mail, all probably 25 or 30 items, was addressed to Sabrina at my condo, using my unit number, establishing a paper trail that suggested she still lived here, even though she very clearly did not, and had not for over a week. I gathered the entire pile against my chest like I was carrying a very annoying baby and took it back upstairs to my apartment, spreading it all out on my kitchen counter in a formation that looked like a crime scene evidence board. This wasn't accidental. This was strategic. This was Sabrina, or more likely Sabrina on the advice of whatever bargain basement lawyer she'd probably found on Yelp, trying to establish continued residency at my address so she could claim tenant rights or complicate the divorce or just generally make my life more difficult because she was apparently the kind of petty that gives petty people a bad name. I took a picture of the whole spread with my phone, sent it to Alex, my lawyer, the guy who'd helped my buddy Marcus with his Vegas marriage disaster and who I'd officially hired 3 days ago after our consultation meeting, where he'd laughed so hard at my situation he'd actually cried, and waited for him to call me back. It took about 15 minutes. "Noah," Alex said when I answered. And I could hear him still chuckling in that way lawyers do when they encounter something so absurdly predictable that it's almost adorable. Let me guess. You checked your mail today. Alex was one of those guys who seemed perpetually amused by human stupidity, which I guess is a good quality in a divorce lawyer since his entire job is basically dealing with people at their absolute worst. He was probably in his early 50s, had an office that looked like it belonged in a movie about Boston lawyers, even though we were nowhere near Boston, and charged $400 an hour, which seemed expensive until you realized he was worth every penny. My mailbox looks like Sabrina's shopping addiction threw up in it, I said, picking up the American Express notice and reading the balance. $12,000. Jesus Christ. What had she been buying? Everything's addressed to her at my place. I'm assuming this is some kind of scheme. I tried to sound calm and reasonable, but my voice probably gave away the fact that I was about 3 seconds away from driving to wherever Sabrina was currently staying and dumping all this mail on her doorstep like a very pointed care package. It's an old trick, Alex explained, and I could hear him typing in the background, probably taking notes or billing me for this call or both. She's trying to establish continued residency through mail delivery. The logic is that if she can show she still receives mail at that address, she can argue she never really left, that the text message was sent in emotional distress, that you illegally evicted her, blah blah blah. It's not a great strategy, honestly, especially since we have that text message in the police report, but it's annoying enough that we need to shut it down immediately. More typing. Here's what we're going to do. Gather every single piece of mail addressed to her. Write, return to sender. Addressee does not live here on each one. Don't open anything. Don't throw anything away. Just mark it and put it back in outgoing mail. Do this with every piece of mail you receive for her from now on. We're creating our own paper trail showing that she doesn't live there and that you're not accepting mail on her behalf. It sounded simple enough, tedious, but simple, like most things related to divorce seem to be. Got it, I said, already looking around for a marker. Anything else I should know? Any other fun tricks she might try? I was learning that divorce was apparently like a very expensive, very stressful game of chess where your opponent kept trying to flip the board over and claim they'd won. Just document everything, Alex said, his standard advice that he'd probably given to 1,000 clients before me. Take photos, save emails, keep records. If she tries to have packages delivered there, refuse them at the door. If she shows up in person, don't engage, just call me. The more professional and by the book you are, the better you look when this inevitably ends up in front of a judge. He paused. And Noah? Don't write anything stupid on the mail. No snarky notes, no commentary, just the standard return language. I know it's tempting, but trust me, it's not worth it. I spent the next hour at my kitchen counter with a thick black Sharpie, carefully writing, return to sender. Addressee does not live here, on every single piece of mail. The catalogs were easy, just one line across the address label. The bills and notices required more precision since I didn't want to obscure any important information that might be needed later. There was something deeply satisfying about it, this repetitive task that felt like I was actively fighting back against Sabrina's schemes one envelope at a time. Each stamp of the Sharpie was like a small victory, a tiny declaration that no, she didn't live here anymore. No, she couldn't just pretend nothing had changed. And no, I wasn't going to make her life easier by forwarding her mail or accepting her packages or any of the other things that a reasonable ex-spouse might do in a normal divorce. The Restoration Hardware catalog was particularly thick, probably 60 pages of overpriced furniture that all looked vaguely the same, and I spent a solid minute debating whether to flip through it first just to see what kind of stuff Sabrina had been fantasizing about buying with money she didn't have. But Alex's voice echoed in my head. Document everything, stay professional, don't give her ammunition. So I just marked it up and added it to the pile. The collections notice from the jewelry company was harder to mark without feeling a surge of vindictive joy. This was the consequence of her decisions, the paper manifestation of her hubris and greed, and the belief that she could just take an $87,000 ring and face no repercussions. I wanted to write something snarky on it, maybe good luck with that, or hope Travis has good credit, or even just a smiley face, but I restrained myself and stuck with the standard language. When I was done, I had a neat stack of about 30 pieces of mail, all clearly marked, all ready to go back into the postal system. I took another photo of the stack, sent it to Alex with a caption that just said, "Mission accomplished," and headed down to the lobby. Our building had an outgoing mail slot near the mailboxes, one of those brass deals that looked fancy, but was probably installed in 1987 and hadn't been updated since. I stood there feeding each piece of mail through the slot, watching them disappear one by one, imagining them making their way back through the postal system to wherever Sabrina had submitted her change of address form, landing on her doorstep or in her temporary mailbox or wherever she was currently hiding out with Travis. The mailman, Jerry, who I'd seen around the building for the past 2 years and had always seemed like a solid dude, came through the lobby door just as I was finishing up. He was probably in his 60s, black guy with gray at his temples, and the kind of weathered face that comes from spending decades outside in all kinds of weather. "Hey Noah," he said, nodding at me and then noticing the pile of mail I was holding. "Everything okay? That's a lot of returns." His tone suggested he'd seen this kind of thing before, probably dozens of times in his career. The aftermath of breakups and divorces and roommate situations gone wrong, all played out through the United States Postal Service. "My wife moved out," I said, keeping it simple because Jerry didn't need the whole story. "She's trying to pretend she still lives here." I'm correcting the record. I held up the last few pieces of mail, all clearly marked with my Sharpa declaration. Jerry nodded slowly, understanding crossing his face, and adjusted his mail bag on his shoulder. "Yeah, I've seen that before. Had a lady on my route once who kept changing her ex-husband's address to her place, then refusing his mail, then changing it back, then refusing it again. Went on for like 6 months until a judge told them both to knock it off." He shook his head. "People get weird about mail when relationships end, like it's the last thing they can control or something." He gave me a sympathetic look. "Just keep returning it. Eventually the system figures it out. And hey, at least you're being civil about it. Some people write some really nasty stuff on those returns. I've seen things that would make your grandmother faint." I thought about the note I'd considered writing. "Also, please take your delusions with you," and smiled. "Yeah, my lawyer said to keep it professional. No commentary, just the facts." Jerry nodded approvingly and continued on his route, leaving me standing in the lobby with my empty hands and a small sense of accomplishment. It wasn't much, just mail, just paperwork, just another tedious task in the endless series of tedious tasks that apparently made up the divorce process. But it felt like progress, like I was actively dismantling her attempts to maintain control, one return catalog at a time. If there's one thing I learned during this whole divorce circus, it's that some people will believe absolutely anything if it's packaged with the right amount of emotional manipulation and fake tears. Sabrina, being the kind of person who'd probably convinced herself that she was actually the victim in this situation, had apparently decided that her next move wasn't to lay low and deal with her consequences like an adult, but instead to launch what I can only describe as a full-scale sympathy tour, a pity PR campaign designed to rewrite history and paint herself as some kind of wronged woman who'd been forced into the arms of her ex-boyfriend by my apparent failures as a husband. I discovered this delightful development on a Wednesday morning when I was making eggs, actual breakfast eggs at a normal breakfast time, another small victory in my new single life, and my phone dinged with an email notification that made me nearly drop my spatula into the garbage disposal. The email was from Melissa Chun, the wedding photographer Sabrina had insisted we hire despite my protests that maybe, just maybe, we didn't need to spend $4,000 on someone to take pictures of us awkwardly posing in front of decorative hay bales or whatever rustic nightmare venue Sabrina had picked out. Melissa was one of those Instagram photographer types who referred to herself as a visual storyteller and had a website full of couples gazing into each other's eyes in fields during golden hour, looking like they'd never had a single argument about whose turn it was to take out the trash. The email subject line read, "Thinking of you during this difficult time," which immediately set off alarm bells because nobody who starts an email like that is about to tell you good news or offer you money. I opened it while my eggs were slowly turning from scrambled to rubber on the stove and had to read it 3 times before my brain could fully process the audacity. "Dear Noah," it began, already irritating me because we'd maybe had 2 conversations total and she definitely didn't know me well enough to dear me. "I hope this email finds you well. Sabrina reached out to me yesterday and shared what you're going through. I'm so sorry to hear about your struggles during this challenging season of life." My struggles. Like I was the one who torpedoed my marriage via text message from a Miami hotel room. As someone who works with couples in their most vulnerable moments, I understand how difficult separation can be, and I want you to know that I'm here to support you both through this transition. The email continued, and this is where it went from annoying to absolutely buck wild. Sabrina mentioned that she and Travis are hoping to do a fresh start couple session to celebrate their reunion and new beginning together. She asked if we could apply your $2,200 deposit toward their shoot, which I think is a beautiful example of turning pain into growth and allowing love to bloom even from difficult circumstances. I actually said, "What the hell?" out loud to my empty apartment, startling myself with the sound of my own voice. She wanted to use my deposit, my money, that I'd paid 6 months ago for a wedding that was never going to happen because my wife had decided to upgrade to her ex-boyfriend, to take romantic photos of said wife with said ex-boyfriend. The mental gymnastics required to present this as somehow reasonable or beautiful or an example of love blooming was Olympic level. But wait, there was more, because Melissa apparently wasn't done demonstrating her complete lack of professional boundaries or basic common sense. I believe in the power of new beginnings and the importance of documenting love in all its forms. If you're open to this, it would mean so much to Sabrina during this healing process, and I think it would show tremendous grace and maturity on your part. Please let me know your thoughts when you have a chance. Sending you light and positive energy during this time of transformation. Light and positive energy. She'd signed off with light and positive energy like she was some kind of spiritual guru instead of a person who was basically asking if she could steal my money and use it to photograph my ex-wife's new relationship. I stood there in my kitchen, holding my phone in one hand and a spatula in the other, my eggs now completely destroyed and stuck to the pan, trying to decide if I was more angry or impressed by the sheer boldness of this request. This was next-level entitlement, the kind of thing you'd see in a Reddit thread where everyone in the comments would be saying, "This can't be real. Nobody is actually this clueless," except it was real and happening to me in real time. I briefly considered responding myself, maybe something along the lines of, "Dear Melissa, absolutely not. Also, please consider taking a class on professional ethics and maybe basic human decency," but I'd learned my lesson about handling this stuff directly. Instead, I forwarded the email to Alex with a message that just said, "Can you believe this?" and went to make new eggs because these ones were unsalvageable, much like my faith in humanity. Alex called me back within an hour, and I could hear him laughing before he even said hello. "Noah, my guy, I've been practicing law for 23 years and I thought I'd seen every possible variation of people being terrible to each other during divorces, but this is genuinely a new one. She wants to use your money to take engagement photos with her new boyfriend or old boyfriend, whatever he is." He was still chuckling, that deep laugh that suggested he was going to tell this story at lawyer happy hours for years to come. This is actually insane. Like, clinically, objectively insane. I'm billing you for this call, but honestly, I should be paying you for the entertainment value. So I'm assuming my answer should be no? I said, scraping my ruined eggs into the trash and starting over for the third time because apparently I couldn't cook and deal with emotional turmoil simultaneously. Or is there some legal reason I have to let her steal my deposit for her romantic photo shoot with the guy she cheated on me with? I was being sarcastic, but also genuinely asking because divorce law was apparently full of weird loopholes and technicalities that made no logical sense. "Oh, hell no," Alex said, his lawyer voice kicking in now, "all business. That deposit is yours. You paid it for services that are no longer being rendered because your wedding was canceled due to your wife's infidelity. The photographer has no legal right to transfer it to another client without your explicit consent, and you are absolutely not giving that consent. I'm going to send her a response that's professional but very, very clear about why this is not happening." I heard him typing, probably already drafting the email. "And Noah, this is actually good for us. It shows that Sabrina is continuing to act in bad faith, trying to take things that belong to you, trying to manipulate service providers into giving her free stuff. This is the kind of behavior that makes judges very unsympathetic." The email Alex sent to Melissa was a masterpiece of professional passive aggression. I got CC'd on it about 30 minutes later, and it opened with, "Dear Ms. Chun, I represent Noah Harris in his divorce proceedings. He has forwarded me your recent email regarding the misappropriation of his wedding photography deposit. Misappropriation. I love that he went straight for legal terminology that made it sound like a crime, which honestly it kind of was. The email continued. Please be advised that the $2,200 deposit paid by my client is his property and was rendered for specific services related to his wedding to Ms. Morrison, services which are no longer needed due to circumstances beyond my client's control. Beyond my client's control, nice way of saying, because his wife cheated on him without actually saying it. But the real kicker was the closing paragraph. Any attempt to transfer, apply, or otherwise utilize my client's funds for services benefiting Ms. Morrison and her companion would constitute theft of services and breach of contract. My client does not consent to such use under any circumstances. Furthermore, if Ms. Morrison wishes to book photography services with you, she should do so using her own financial resources rather than attempting to appropriate funds that do not belong to her. This pattern of behavior is well documented and will be presented in divorce proceedings as evidence of financial impropriety and bad faith dealings. Alex had attached case law citations at the bottom, probably just to make it look extra official and intimidating, though I had no idea if they were even relevant or if he'd just pulled them from a random folder to pad the email. The best part was the sign-off. Please confirm receipt of this email and your understanding that Mr. Harris's deposit will be refunded in full per the terms of your original contract, or held for potential future use by him exclusively. Any further attempts to coordinate with Ms. Morrison regarding my client's financial accounts will be considered harassment and dealt with accordingly. I could practically hear the threat in those words even though Alex had never explicitly said what accordingly meant. It was beautiful, professional, and absolutely devastating. Melissa responded within 2 hours. Apparently, the combination of legal terminology and the threat of being accused of theft had motivated her to suddenly become very professional. Her email was brief and devoid of all the light and positive energy nonsense from before. Mr. Harris, I apologize for any confusion. Your deposit will remain in your account and will not be transferred or used for any other clients. If you would like to request a refund, please let me know. Thank you for your understanding. No mention of Sabrina, no mention of fresh starts or new beginnings, no mention of grace or maturity or any of the emotional manipulation she'd tried before. Just a straightforward business response from someone who'd suddenly remembered that being a photographer didn't give her license to play therapist or financial advisor. I never responded to her directly. Alex said it was better to leave it there, let her sweat about whether I was going to push for legal action or just let it go. The truth was I didn't particularly care about the $2,200 at that point. I'd already written off way more money in wedding deposits and the ring payments and all the other financial debris of my imploded marriage. But the principle mattered. The fact that Sabrina had actually called up our wedding photographer, spun some sob story about my struggles, and asked to use my money for her new relationship photos. That was the kind of behavior that needed to be shut down immediately and firmly. Not because I was vindictive, though let's be honest, I was feeling pretty vindictive at that point, but because if I let her get away with it once, she'd try it again with the caterer, the venue, the DJ, every vendor we'd booked, systematically trying to transfer or steal or manipulate her way into getting free stuff on my dime. I'd been divorced from reality long enough at this point, about 3 weeks into this nightmare, that I thought I'd seen every possible way Sabrina could try to twist the situation in her favor. I'd dealt with the mail scheme, the cop visit, the photographer heist attempt, and approximately 47 text messages from various members of her friend group explaining why I was actually the bad guy in this scenario despite, not being the one who'd cheated. So when Alex called me on a Thursday morning and opened with "sit down for this one," I actually laughed because what else could possibly happen? Turns out, I was adorably naive about just how low this whole situation could sink. Sabrina hired a lawyer, Alex said, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Well, hired might be generous. She found someone. His name is Mitchell Brandenburg, works out of a strip mall office between a vape shop and a place that does eyebrow threading. His website has a stock photo of a gavel and the tagline "Fighting for Your Rights" in Comic Sans font. Alex paused for effect. Noah, I'm going to be straight with you. This guy is either completely incompetent or he didn't bother to read any of the case facts before drafting this demand letter, Because what I'm holding in my hands right now is possibly the most legally absurd document I've encountered in my entire career, and I once had a case where a guy tried to sue his ex-wife for custody of their shared Netflix account. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, pretending to work from home, but actually just scrolling through apartment listings, because even though this condo was mine, the whole place felt contaminated now with Sabrina memories that I wanted to escape. How bad are we talking? I asked, already bracing myself because Alex's tone suggested this was going to be entertainingly terrible. What's she asking for? The condo? My kidney? Firstborn child I don't have. Try $125,000, Alex said, and I heard him flip through pages. Let me read you the breakdown because it's truly spectacular. First, she wants the full $87,000 for the ring debt, which she's claiming you manipulated her into opening because, and I'm quoting here, the defendant used his superior financial knowledge and emotional influence to trick the plaintiff into assuming debt that was meant for their shared future. Superior financial knowledge. Noah, you work in IT project management. You're not Warren Buffett. You didn't manipulate anyone into anything. She wanted a massive ring. She signed the credit application herself, and now she's mad about the consequences. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming behind my eyes. Okay, that's insane but predictable. What's the other $38,000 for? Emotional damages from me being mean enough to stop paying for her jewelry after she cheated on me? The sarcasm in my voice was thick enough to spread on toast, but Alex wasn't done destroying my morning. Close, he said. She's claiming $25,000 in emotional distress damages because you publicly humiliated her by changing the locks and forcing her to involve law enforcement, which caused her severe anxiety and reputational harm. And then there's $13,000 for something her lawyer is calling credit rehabilitation costs, which is apparently what it's going to cost to repair her credit score after, again, quoting, the defendant's financial sabotage campaign. Financial sabotage. You stopped paying for a ring she stole. That's not sabotage. That's just basic cause and effect. But apparently Mitchell Brandenburg missed that day in law school. I let out a laugh that sounded slightly unhinged even to my own ears. So let me get this straight. She cheated on me, dumped me via text, stole an $87,000 ring, tried to move back into my condo with police assistance, attempted to steal my photography deposit, and is now suing me for $125,000 because I had the audacity to not continue funding her terrible life choices? Did I miss anything, or is that the complete list of how I'm apparently the villain here? Oh, there's more, Alex said, and I could hear the grin in his voice because he was clearly enjoying this on some level, probably because he knew exactly how this was going to play out. Brandenburg's letter includes a whole section about how you failed to provide adequate emotional support during your marriage, which drove Sabrina to seek comfort elsewhere. He's actually trying to argue that your emotional neglect is what caused her to cheat. Therefore, you're partially responsible for the current situation and should pay for damages. It's victim blaming dressed up in legal terminology, and it's not going to fly even a little bit, but the balls on this guy to actually put it in writing are kind of impressive. I stood up from my kitchen table and walked to the window, looking out at the city below, where normal people were going about their normal Thursday mornings, probably not dealing with strip mall lawyers trying to extort them for six figures. What's our response? Please tell me our response involves some variation of go to hell, but in fancy lawyer language. I was only half joking because at this point, I was tired of being reasonable and professional and taking the high road when Sabrina and her Comic Sans attorney were clearly operating in a different moral universe. Better, Alex said, and I heard his keyboard clicking. I'm drafting a response right now that's going to include every single piece of evidence we have. The text message where she admits to cheating and says she's keeping the ring. The police report showing she voluntarily left and tried to force entry later. The jeweler's credit agreement with her signature all over it. The photographer email showing her pattern of trying to misappropriate your funds. And your bank records showing you paid faithfully for months until she explicitly ended the marriage. We're also attaching the records of her mail forwarding scheme, which shows ongoing bad faith dealings. The clicking continued, and I imagined Alex in his office that looked like a movie set, probably wearing one of his expensive suits that he bought specifically because he said they intimidated opposing counsel, typing up a legal document that would hopefully end this circus once and for all. The key argument, Alex continued, his voice taking on that lecturer tone he used when he was explaining legal strategy, is that she cannot keep the asset and deny the liability. She's wearing the ring. We have photos from her Instagram where she's literally showing it off in posts from last week, by the way, which her lawyer apparently didn't think to check before filing this demand. She can't simultaneously claim the ring as her property and claim that the debt isn't her responsibility. That's not how debt works. That's not how any of this works. Wait, I interrupted, processing what he'd just said. She's posting the ring on Instagram? After everything? After trying to claim I'm sabotaging her credit and emotionally devastating her. I grabbed my phone and opened Instagram for the first time in weeks. I'd basically abandoned social media after the breakup because I didn't need to see Sabrina's curated highlight reel of her new life. Sure enough, her profile was public and her recent posts were a masterclass in delusion. There she was at some trendy restaurant, hand prominently displayed, holding a cocktail glass, diamond catching the light like a disco ball. The caption read, "New beginnings and grateful for second chances gemstone sparkles," with about 100 comments from people who clearly didn't know she'd stolen that diamond from her marriage. Another post from 3 days ago showed her and Travis at the beach, her hand on his chest, ring front and center, caption reading, "Sometimes love finds you when you least expect it, Waterwave Red Heart." I scrolled through her friends' comments. Lots of "you deserve this, queen," and "so happy for you," and "that ring is gorgeous," and felt my blood pressure rising. She was literally parading around the stolen ring like it was a trophy, posting it all over social media, but simultaneously claiming through her lawyer that I was the one causing her emotional distress and credit problems. The cognitive dissonance was spectacular. Yeah, Alex said, clearly having already done his social media reconnaissance. She's not exactly being subtle about it, which, from a legal standpoint, is fantastic for us because it completely undermines her claim that you're trying to steal the ring back or that she's suffering in any way from your sabotage. She's literally using it as a prop in her new relationship announcement tour. Brandenburg either didn't check her social media or he's even dumber than his Comic Sans website suggests, because any competent lawyer would have told her to take that stuff down immediately. The response letter Alex drafted was, in his words, polite but devastating. He sent me a draft later that afternoon, and reading it was like watching a master chef prepare a meal. Every ingredient perfectly measured, every element building toward a conclusion that was both inevitable and satisfying. It opened with the standard legal pleasantries before systematically dismantling every single claim in Brandenburg's demand letter. The section about the ring was particularly brutal. Your client cannot maintain possession of an $87,000 asset while simultaneously denying responsibility for the associated debt. This is not a matter of opinion or interpretation. It is fundamental contract law. Ms. Morrison signed the credit agreement in her own name, selected the ring herself, and has retained possession of said ring following the dissolution of the marriage. She has further publicized her possession of the ring through social media posts. See Exhibits F through J, undermining any claim that Mr. Harris is attempting to deprive her of property. Exhibits F through J were screenshots from Sabrina's Instagram, carefully documented with dates and timestamps, showing her flaunting the ring like she'd earned it through hard work rather than theft and audacity. Alex had even included one where you could see Travis in the background looking vaguely uncomfortable, probably because he was slowly realizing that the woman he'd accidentally reconnected with came with $87,000 in baggage and a personality that treated other people's money like a community resource. The emotional distress section was equally savage. Ms. Morrison's claim of public humiliation is without merit. Mr. Harris exercised his legal right to secure his property after MS. Morrison explicitly communicated via text message that she was terminating the marriage and would not return. The involvement of law enforcement was initiated by Ms. Morrison herself when she attempted to gain unauthorized entry to a property she had voluntarily abandoned. One cannot claim emotional distress from consequences that directly result from one's own actions and decisions. Alex had attached the police report as an exhibit, highlighting the officer's conclusion that this was a domestic matter, not an illegal eviction. But my favorite part was the closing paragraph, which Alex had crafted with what I can only describe as surgical precision. Your client's demand for $125,000 is not only legally baseless, but represents a continuation of the pattern of behavior that led to the dissolution of this marriage. Specifically, an expectation that Mr. Harris should fund Ms. Morrison's lifestyle and choices regardless of her actions or their impact on him. This demand will not be entertained. Should your client wish to pursue this matter further, we are prepared to present extensive documentation of her bad faith dealings, attempted fraud, and ongoing harassment. We trust you will advise your client accordingly. It was professional, it was devastating, and it basically amounted to try us and see what happens, which in lawyer speak is about as aggressive as you can get without actually threatening someone. Alex sent the response on Friday afternoon, CCing me, so I could watch it land like a legal nuclear bomb in Mitchell Brandenburg's inbox. Now we wait, Alex said when he called to confirm he'd sent it. Either Brandenburg will realize he's in over his head and advise Sabrina to drop it, or he'll double down and we'll end up in court where a judge will laugh them out of the room. Either way, you're fine. This is harassment disguised as legal action, and it's not going to work. I thanked him, hung up, and cracked open a beer even though it was only 4 p.m. on a Friday, because if there was ever a time to day drink, it was while watching your ex-wife's legal case implode before it even started. Sunday night, 9:47 p.m., and I was doing absolutely nothing of importance, sprawled on my couch in sweatpants watching a documentary about some billionaire's yacht that cost more than a small country's GDP, the kind of content you watch when your brain is too fried to handle anything with an actual plot. I'd spent the weekend in blissful ignorance of whatever fresh hell Sabrina and her discount lawyer were cooking up, choosing instead to focus on important life questions like whether I should order pizza or Chinese food, and if buying a PlayStation 5 counted as healthy emotional processing or avoidance behavior. I decided on both pizza and the PlayStation, because if you can't make questionable financial decisions during your divorce, when can you? My phone rang from somewhere in the couch cushions, buzzing like an angry bee that had gotten trapped in the upholstery. I dug it out and saw a blocked number on the screen, which usually meant spam about my car's extended warranty or some robot trying to convince me I owed back taxes to the IRS. I almost let it go to voicemail. My new philosophy was that anyone who actually needed to reach me would leave a message or text like a normal human being in 2025, but something made me answer it. Maybe curiosity, maybe boredom, maybe the universe deciding I needed one more ridiculous plot twist before the weekend ended. Hello, I said, my voice carrying that particular tone of suspicion you use when answering blocked numbers, like I was already prepared to hang up the second someone started talking about duct cleaning or solar panels. There was a pause, some background noise that sounded like traffic or maybe a TV, and then a male voice that I didn't immediately recognize, but somehow knew was going to ruin my peaceful evening. Noah? Hey man, it's Travis. The voice was nervous, talking fast like he'd been working up the courage to make this call, and was trying to get through it before he lost his nerve. I know this is weird, and you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you about Sabrina. It's kind of an emergency. Travis, the ex-boyfriend, the guy who'd accidentally slept with my wife and was now apparently discovering that winning Sabrina came with a whole lot of baggage he hadn't signed up for. I sat up straighter on my couch, my documentary forgotten, because this was going to be good. Travis, I said slowly, letting his name hang in the air like a bad smell. You've got about 30 seconds to explain why you're calling me from a blocked number on a Sunday night before I hang up and block every possible variation of your phone number I can think of. Make it count. I wasn't actually going to hang up. I was way too curious about what could possibly motivate this dude to call me, but I wanted him to know I wasn't his buddy and this wasn't a social call. Okay, I get it. You hate me. That's fair, he rushed out, his words tumbling over each other like he was reading from a script he'd memorized but was screwing up under pressure. But dude, please, you gotta help me out here. Sabrina is absolutely losing it. Like, losing it. Collection agencies have been calling nonstop for the past 3 days. Her phone rings every hour with a different number. They're calling her mom's house. They found her email somehow, and she's getting like 50 messages a day about the ring payment. She told me the ring was paid off, man. She said it was all handled, that you'd taken care of it as like a final gesture or whatever, and now I'm finding out there's $87,000 in debt, and it's all in her name, and she's screaming and crying, and I don't know what to do. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing, because the mental image of Sabrina's carefully constructed fantasy life collapsing around her, while Travis stood there realizing he'd traded up from whatever peaceful existence he'd had to a financial disaster zone, was almost too perfect. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that comes from watching karma work in real time. Sabrina told you the $87,000 ring she stole from our marriage was paid off? Like, completely paid for? And you believed her? Travis, buddy, she finances her jewelry like people finance cars. She probably finances her shoes. Did she also tell you she was going to pay for that debt herself? Or was she maybe hoping I'd just keep making payments while she rode off into the sunset with you? There was silence on the other end, the kind of silence that meant I'd hit the nail directly on the head, and Travis was having one of those terrible moments of clarity where you realize you've made a catastrophically stupid decision, but it's too late to undo it. She said it was complicated. He finally managed, his voice smaller now, less demanding. She said you were being vindictive about the money stuff because you were hurt, but that legally the ring was hers and the debt would get resolved in the divorce. I didn't realize, he trailed off, probably realizing that admitting he'd done zero due diligence before getting back together with a woman who'd just blown up her marriage was not making him look great. You didn't think. I finished for him, feeling a surge of petty satisfaction that was probably unhealthy, but felt amazing in the moment. You slept with a married woman, helped her end her marriage via text message from a hotel room, and didn't think to ask basic questions about her financial situation or whether maybe, just maybe, there might be some consequences to wearing an $87,000 ring that she'd never actually paid for. That's not complicated, Travis. That's just you being an idiot. I probably should have been more sympathetic. Dude was clearly in over his head, but honestly, he'd made his bed, or in this case, he'd accidentally fallen into Sabrina's bed, and now he got to lie in it along with $87,000 in jewelry debt and a girlfriend who apparently hadn't mentioned that minor detail. We tried to sell it, Travis blurted out, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice now, the reality of his situation fully sinking in. Like, we looked into selling the ring to pay off the debt, or at least make a big payment to get the collection agency's offer back. We took it to 3 different jewelers, man. 3 different places. You know what they said? He didn't wait for me to answer. They said that because it's a custom ring, because it's so specific to Sabrina's specifications or whatever, that it would maybe fetch $30,000 on the resale market. $30,000, dude. That's like a third of what she owes. She had a complete meltdown in the last jewelry store. Full crying, mascara everywhere, asking them if they were sure, like maybe if she cried hard enough the laws of economics would change and the ring would magically be worth what she paid for it. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep in my chest. The kind of laugh you experience when the universe delivers justice so perfectly that it feels almost scripted. Sabrina had picked that ring herself, insisted on every custom detail, demanded that specific setting and cut, and whatever else she'd explained to Marcus the jeweler, while I sat there nodding and silently calculating how many years of payments this was going to be. She'd wanted a statement piece, something unique that none of her friends would have, something that would photograph well on Instagram and make people jealous. And now that uniqueness, that custom specialness, meant the ring was worth maybe a third of what she owed on it. Karma wasn't just real, it was petty and perfect and better at revenge than I could ever be. That's rough, Travis, I said, not even trying to hide the amusement in my voice. Turns out financing your jewelry based on emotional value rather than resale value is a bad investment strategy. Who knew? Oh wait, literally everyone except Sabrina. I could hear him breathing on the other end, probably trying to figure out if there was any angle he could work here, any way to convince me to swoop in and save them from the consequences of their own choices. Can't you just, I don't know, man, work something out? Make a payment or 2 to get them to stop calling. She's going crazy, Noah. She's not sleeping. She's snapping at everyone. She keeps screaming at me about how this is all your fault for abandoning your financial commitments or whatever. She threw a plate at the wall last night. An actual plate. It shattered everywhere, and her mom had to come over and calm her down. Travis sounded exhausted, like he'd aged 5 years in the 2 weeks since he'd decided to accidentally reconnect with his ex-girlfriend. I thought I was getting back together with the girl I knew in college, you know? The fun, spontaneous girl who was down for anything. This is not that girl. This is like a completely different person who comes with $87,000 in debt and a persecution complex. Yeah, well, welcome to the reality I lived in for 3 years, I said, feeling zero sympathy for his situation. That fun, spontaneous girl? That was an act, Travis. That was Sabrina's highlight reel, her best behavior, the version she performs when she's trying to lock someone down. The plate throwing, blame everyone else, financially irresponsible disaster you're dealing with now? That's the real Sabrina. That's the woman who opens $87,000 credit lines for rings she can't afford, who thinks consequences are optional, and who will absolutely make every single problem in her life someone else's fault. Congratulations on your reunion. I hope you two are very happy together, preferably far away from me and my bank account. Travis made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob, hard to tell over the phone. So you're not going to help, he said, and it wasn't really a question, more like the final confirmation of something he'd already known before he called. You're just going to let her credit get destroyed and let the collection agencies keep calling and let her have a complete breakdown over this. Travis, I'm not letting her do anything, I said, my patience for this conversation rapidly running out. Sabrina is an adult woman who made adult decisions. She wanted the ring. She signed for the ring. She kept the ring after ending our marriage, and now she gets to pay for the ring. That's not me being vindictive or cruel or whatever story she's selling you. That's just basic cause and effect, something she's apparently never learned. And honestly, the fact that she's having a breakdown, throwing plates, and blaming everyone but herself just proves I made the right choice in not fighting to save this marriage. You won, buddy. You got the girl. Enjoy your prize. I hung up before he could respond, sat there for a second staring at my phone, and then did something I probably should have done weeks ago. I blocked Sabrina's number, her mom's number, Trina's number, and every other person associated with this circus that I could think of. I was done. Done with the drama. Done with the manipulation. Done with people calling me expecting me to fix problems that weren't mine to fix. I turned my documentary back on, ordered that Chinese food I'd been debating, and felt lighter than I had in months. Somewhere out there, Sabrina was having a meltdown about consequences. And somewhere in here, in my paid-off condo with my destroyed marriage finally in the rearview mirror, I was finally, genuinely at peace. Friday morning, 10 a.m. sharp, and my intercom buzzed with the police department announcing they were here for a civil standby. Cops speak for, we're babysitting adults who can't handle a breakup like grown-ups. I buzzed them up along with Alex, who'd insisted on being present because apparently Sabrina's strip mall lawyer had threatened legal action if I didn't return her belongings, despite the fact that I'd already texted her 3 times offering to leave everything in the lobby. The same cop from before, Officer Williams, showed up looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Behind him stood Sabrina, her mom Patricia doing her best impression of a woman wronged by society, and Trina the enabler, all dressed like they were attending a funeral instead of picking up boxes of shoes and overpriced candles. No Travis this time. Apparently, he'd reached his limit on Sabrina-related drama and had wisely evacuated the premises. Smart man. Took him long enough. I'd spent the previous evening packing 14 boxes of her stuff. Clothes, makeup, books she'd never read, decorative pillows that served no purpose except taking up space. Everything labeled, organized, stacked neatly by my door like I was running a very depressing storage facility. When the door finally closed behind Sabrina and her entourage of enablers, Alex turned to me with this smirk that said he'd seen this exact scenario play out 100 times before. She's done, he said, packing up his briefcase like a surgeon who'd just completed a successful operation. She'll probably declare bankruptcy within 6 months and lose the ring anyway. The collection agencies don't care about her feelings or her fresh start with Travis. I nodded, cracking open a beer even though it wasn't even noon yet. So basically a full circle moment. She gets nothing, loses everything, and I get my life back. Exactly, Alex said, heading out. That night, I did something I'd been wanting to do for 2 years. I painted my living room this deep charcoal gray that Sabrina had always vetoed as too depressing. Turns out, it's actually peaceful as hell. Word through the grapevine is that Sabrina's credit score now starts with a 4, and Travis blocked her number after his card got declined at Olive Garden during what was supposed to be a romantic date night. I lost about $25,000 in wedding deposits and ring payments, but I gained something better: silence, sanity, and one absolutely legendary story. At our anniversary dinner, my wife stood with her friends, holding divorce papers. To his new king. They cheered as she slipped an arm around her lovers. I signed quietly, thanked them all, then did something that turned their cheers into stunned silence. If humiliation had a GPS, it would have dropped me right at Maison du Loon, the same overpriced French restaurant where I once got down on one knee and proposed to my wife, Camille. That was 3 years ago, back when I thought love meant something more than a good credit score and a tolerance for her mother's passive-aggressive comments about my potential. Now here I was again, wearing my best navy suit, the one I reserved for funerals and, apparently, the death of my marriage. Because if you're going to get publicly humiliated, you might as well look sharp doing it. The invitation had come 2 days prior. "Let's celebrate our anniversary," she'd texted, complete with a champagne emoji that should have been my first red flag. Camille hadn't voluntarily celebrated anything with me since I remembered to take out the trash without being asked, which, according to her, was the bare minimum, not an achievement. But I played along. I RSVP'd with a thumbs-up emoji because that's what emotionally exhausted husbands do. We communicate in symbols because words require effort neither of us had anymore. I arrived exactly on time because punctuality is apparently the only thing I'm good at, according to every performance review Camille had given me over the last 6 months. The hostess, a 20-something with the kind of smile that said she'd seen too many first dates go wrong, led me through the dimly lit dining room. The place smelled like truffle oil and broken dreams, with a soundtrack of soft jazz that was trying way too hard to be sophisticated. I spotted Camille immediately because she'd strategically chosen the table right in the center of the restaurant. Maximum visibility for whatever Fresh Prince of Divorce she was about to perform. She wasn't alone. Of course she wasn't alone. That would have required a shred of decency, and Camille had traded hers in for a yoga membership and a new sense of self-discovery that apparently included discovering other men. Sitting to her right was Becky, her best friend since college and the human equivalent of a car alarm. Loud, unnecessary, and somehow always going off at the worst possible moments. Becky was the kind of person who thought saying everything at maximum volume made her more interesting. It didn't. It just made everyone else's ears hurt. She was wearing some sort of sparkly dress that looked like it had been bedazzled by a craft store explosion, and her laugh could probably shatter the wine glasses she was already 3 deep into. Then there was the man. Oh yes, the man. Dylan. I recognized him immediately from Camille's Instagram stories. You know, the one she posted from her business retreat that looked suspiciously like a couple's vacation with someone who definitely wasn't me. Dylan was her yoga instructor, because of course he was. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, and apparently, cheating spouse cliches are its favorite comedy routine. He had that whole, "I'm spiritual and grounded" look going on, man bun, beaded bracelet, the kind of smug expression that suggested he'd never had an original thought in his life, but was really proud of the motivational quotes he reposted. The table was set up like a celebration. There were 3 bottles of wine, 2 already empty, which explained Becky's volume level, and someone had even brought a small bouquet of flowers. How thoughtful. Nothing says, "I'm about to ruin your life," quite like decorative centerpieces. As I approached, Camille raised her glass, and I noticed her nails were a fresh shade of crimson. She'd clearly prepared for this moment like it was a TED Talk on betrayal. "To new beginnings," she announced, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. Her entourage, because apparently this wasn't a divorce announcement, it was a performance, cheered in response. "To his new king," Becky screeched, slapping the table like she'd just delivered the punchline of the century. I stopped walking, blinked, processed. Wait, that's when I saw it. Dylan's arm wasn't just near Camille. It was around her, possessively. The way my arm used to be during our engagement photos before I realized I'd signed up for a lifetime subscription to disappointment. He had this satisfied grin on his face, like he'd just won a prize at a carnival. Except the prize was my wife, and the carnival was my life falling apart in real time. Camille reached into her designer purse, The one I'd bought her last Christmas because she'd dropped hints the size of billboard advertisements, and pulled out a crisp manila envelope. She slid it across the table toward me with the kind of dramatic flair usually reserved for soap operas. "Happy anniversary, Milo," she said, and I swear I could hear the satisfaction dripping from every syllable. I picked up the envelope, opened it. Divorce papers. Neat, organized, already filled out with her lawyer's information prominently displayed at the top. She'd even bookmarked the signature pages with those little sticky tabs. Efficient. I had to give her that. She'd planned my professional destruction with the same energy most people reserve for wedding planning. The table erupted in laughter. Not polite chuckles. Full-blown cackling. Becky was practically crying, mascara starting to run down her face. Dylan was grinning like an idiot, probably mentally composing his next Instagram caption about manifesting abundance, or whatever pseudo-spiritual garbage he peddled to lonely housewives. Even the waiter, who'd just arrived with more wine, looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to teleport to literally any other section of the restaurant. This was it. The grand finale. The public execution of Milo Gray, faithful husband, reliable provider, and apparently the world's biggest chump. But here's the thing about being underestimated your entire marriage. People forget you're capable of surprises too. I looked at the papers, looked at Camille, looked at Dylan's stupid man bun. Then I did something that shocked even me. I smiled. Not a sad smile, not a defeated smile. A genuine, almost peaceful smile that came from somewhere deep inside. Probably the part of me that had been screaming for 6 months, but I'd been too polite to acknowledge. I pulled out a pen from my jacket pocket, because I'm nothing if not prepared, and signed every single page. Methodically, calmly, while they all watched, their laughter starting to die down into confused silence. When I finished, I slid the papers back across the table. "Thank you," I said quietly, looking Camille directly in the eyes. "Thank you for the show." Then I stood up, straightened my tie, and did something that made the entire restaurant, the waiters, the other diners, even the pianist in the corner, go completely, utterly, dead silent. But that part, that's a story for another time. 6 months before my wife decided to turn our anniversary into a public roasting session, I was living in what I can only describe as blissful, catastrophic ignorance. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and screaming at the protagonist not to go into the basement? Yeah, I was that idiot, except the basement was my marriage and I was skipping down the stairs humming show tunes. I used to think marriage was teamwork, two people pulling together toward common goals like financial stability, emotional support, and figuring out whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. Turns out, I'd been the only one sweating while Camille had been sitting courtside with a protein shake, watching me run sprints like some kind of matrimonial gym membership she'd forgotten to cancel. It started small, the way most disasters do. Camille began staying late at work. "Big project," she'd say, breezing through the door at 10 p.m. smelling like expensive perfume I definitely hadn't bought her. I'd have dinner waiting, because apparently I'd morphed into a 1950s housewife without the pearls or the satisfaction, and she'd pick at it while scrolling through her phone, laughing at messages she never let me see. "Work stuff?" she'd explain when I'd glance over, curious. "You wouldn't get it. Marketing humor." Right, because marketing is famously hilarious. Nothing makes people laugh quite like quarterly projections and target demographics. Then came the girls' nights. Every Thursday, like clockwork, Becky would pick her up, honking that obnoxious horn on her white SUV that probably had more monthly payments than my student loans, and Camille would transform. Suddenly, she'd be wearing heels I'd never seen, dresses that still had tags tucked discreetly inside, makeup applied with the precision of a Renaissance painter. For Becky, and whoever else was apparently attending these estrogen conventions. "Don't wait up," she'd call out, already halfway out the door before I could respond. I didn't wait up. I'd sit on the couch with Netflix and our dog, Captain, a 3-year-old golden retriever who was probably the only honest relationship I had left. At least when Captain wanted something, he'd just stare at me and drool. No mind games. No passive-aggressive comments about my career trajectory or why I hadn't hustled my way into upper management yet. "She's just stressed," I'd tell Captain, who would tilt his head like even he wasn't buying it. "Work's been crazy. The merger, remember?" Captain would yawn. He was a better judge of character than I was. I should have known something was wrong when Camille started saying she was finding herself. That's code, by the way. When your spouse says they're finding themselves, what they actually mean is they're finding someone else. But I was supportive, encouraged it, even. Bought her books with titles like Awakening Your Inner Goddess and The Power of Intentional Living, which she'd stack on her nightstand and never read because self-help books are just decorative items for people who want to look introspective. She joined a gym, then a yoga studio, then a Pilates class. Suddenly my wife had more workout routines than a Navy SEAL, except instead of getting fit for combat, she was getting fit for, well, I'd find out soon enough. It's important to prioritize wellness. She'd lecture me while I made her post-workout smoothies, kale, spinach, protein powder that tasted like liquidized sadness. You should come with me sometime. Self-care isn't selfish, Milo. I worked 60 hours a week as a project manager at a construction firm, juggling deadlines, angry contractors, and a boss named Gerald who thought motivational speeches involved yelling and veiled threats about job security. My idea of self-care was remembering to eat lunch and not crying in the company bathroom. But sure, Camille, tell me more about prioritizing wellness while I fund your spiritual journey. The real kicker? I thought I was being a good husband. Revolutionary, I know. I did the laundry, folded her clothes the way she liked, shirts faced left, pants folded in thirds, don't even get me started on the sock pairing system, and made sure the house was clean when she got home. I bought flowers every Friday from the grocery store, those prearranged bouquets that cost $12 and scream, I'm trying. I'd leave little notes on the bathroom mirror, have a great day, with a smiley face, because nothing says romance like dry erase markers and forced positivity. I was basically a walking Hallmark card with a mortgage and a 401k I'd been contributing to a loan for the last 8 months. Then came the morning that changed everything. The morning I went from clueless husband to amateur detective faster than you can say, emotional devastation. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were trash days and I'd just dragged 3 bins to the curb, feeling accomplished about my contribution to neighborhood sanitation. Camille was already gone. She'd started leaving earlier and earlier for work, sometimes before sunrise, which should have been suspicious for someone whose job didn't officially start until 9. I was making coffee when I saw it. Her smartwatch, just sitting there on the kitchen counter, charging cable still attached. She'd forgotten it. Camille never forgot her smartwatch. That thing was like a third arm to her, constantly buzzing with notifications, tracking her steps, monitoring her heart rate like she was training for the Olympics instead of attending marketing meetings. The screen lit up. A notification. My eyes were drawn to it automatically, the way you can't help but look at a car crash or a Facebook argument in the comments section. Dylan breathed deep yoga studio. Great session, babe. Same time tomorrow? Fire red heart. I stared at that message for a solid 30 seconds. Read it again and again, hoping somehow the words would rearrange themselves into something innocent. Maybe Dylan was a woman. Maybe babe was a term yoga instructors used for all their clients. Maybe the fire emoji and heart emoji were just enthusiastic customer service? Who was I kidding? I picked up the watch, scrolled through the messages with hands that had started shaking somewhere around the second heart emoji. There were dozens. Hundreds, maybe. Messages spanning weeks. You're amazing. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again? And Camille's responses, flirty and eager in a way she hadn't been with me since our honeymoon. And even that was debatable. Dylan. Dylan breathed deep. What kind of name was that? Was Breathe Deep even a real last name, or had he legally changed it for branding purposes? The guy taught yoga for a living and somehow had become the leading man in my wife's secret side quest. Nothing says infidelity quite like a heart emoji after a downward dog. I stood there in my kitchen, coffee forgotten, trash bins successfully on the curb, world successfully imploding, holding evidence of my wife's affair in the palm of my hand. The smartwatch vibrated again. Another message from Dylan. Missing you already, face blowing a kiss. Captain walked over and sat at my feet, sensing something was wrong. He nudged my leg with his nose. Yeah, buddy, I muttered, putting the watch back exactly where I'd found it. Me too. That was the moment. The exact second when Milo Gray, professional doormat and husband of the year, died. And someone new, someone who was done being the punchline, was born. Once you know what you're looking for, the truth stops hiding and starts practically waving at you from across the room. After the smartwatch incident, which I'd mentally filed under things that destroyed my soul before breakfast, I started seeing evidence of Camille's affair everywhere. And I mean everywhere. It was like one of those optical illusion pictures where once someone points out the hidden image, you can't unsee it. Except instead of a dolphin or an old woman's profile, I was seeing betrayal in high definition, surround sound, director's cut edition. The late nights suddenly made sense. Those weren't overtime hours at the marketing firm. Camille worked for a mid-sized company that sold organic skincare products to people with too much money and not enough skepticism. They weren't curing cancer. They weren't launching rockets. They were peddling overpriced face cream with names like Youth Elixir and Radiance Serum that probably cost $3 to manufacture and sold for $80. Nobody was staying late for that. Nobody except my wife, apparently, who discovered that Late at the Office was excellent cover for Late at Dylan's apartment doing poses that definitely weren't in any yoga manual. Then there was her phone. The phone that was suddenly more protected than nuclear launch codes. She'd changed her passcode. I noticed because I tried to use it one morning when mine was dead and I needed to check my work email. 6 attempts later, after trying every combination of important dates I could remember, I was locked out and she was giving me a lecture about privacy and boundaries and personal space. It's not that I don't trust you, she'd said, which is what people say right before explaining exactly why they don't trust you. It's just that everyone deserves their own private space, even in marriage. Sure, Camille. Privacy. That's definitely what you need it for. Not to hide the 17,000 messages from some guy named Dylan who thinks namaste is a personality trait. Her phone was always face down now, always on silent. And she'd developed this nervous habit of checking it every 30 seconds like she was waiting for news about a hostage situation. Which, in a way, I guess she was. Except the hostage was our marriage and the ransom note was written in heart emojis. The scented candles were new too. Suddenly our bedroom smelled like a Bath and Body Works had exploded. Vanilla bourbon, eucalyptus mint, something called Midnight Jasmine that cost $45 and came in a glass jar you could probably use as a weapon. I'd come home to find them burning on every surface, creating this whole aromatherapy situation that I definitely hadn't requested. It's for ambience, Camille explained when I asked. For relaxation. You should try being more mindful, Milo. Not everything needs a practical purpose. Right. Except these candles did have a practical purpose, covering up the fact that she'd been testing them out somewhere else first. Probably at Dylan's place, which I imagined looked like a Pottery Barn catalog threw up in a meditation center. I'd bet money he had a salt lamp, multiple salt lamps, and one of those water fountains that's supposed to bring positive energy, but really just makes you need to pee. But the real evidence? The stuff that would hold up in court if marriage had a justice system? That came from the lingerie. I discovered it by accident. I was putting away laundry, because of course I was. That's what I did. I was the laundry fairy, and I found a receipt in the pocket of one of Camille's blazers. Victoria's Secret. $347. $347. For underwear that probably used less fabric than a handkerchief. Now, I'm not a fashion expert. My idea of dressing up involves pants without elastic waistbands. But I knew one thing for certain. None of that lingerie had made an appearance in our bedroom. I would have remembered. Our intimate life had become about as exciting as watching paint dry, except less colorful and somehow more depressing. We hadn't had what you'd call relations in weeks, maybe months. I'd stopped counting because keeping track of rejection is bad for mental health. So where was all this fancy underwear going? It sure as hell wasn't for my benefit. I kept quiet. This is important. I didn't confront her. Didn't cry. Didn't throw things or demand explanations or do any of the dramatic stuff you see in movies where the betrayed spouse has a public meltdown and smashes dishes. That's amateur hour. That's what she'd expect. That's what would make her the victim in the story she'd already started writing in her head. No, I played it cool. Smiled. Acted normal. Why ruin her fun when I could be planning mine? She thought I was clueless. Thought I was just dumb. Reliable Milo who'd keep doing laundry and making smoothies and pretending everything was fine while she lived her best life with some guy who probably introduced himself as a wellness coach and had opinions about chakras. It was cute, really, watching her think she was getting away with it. Meanwhile, I became Sherlock Holmes with a Wi-Fi connection. I had access to our bank accounts, joint finances, the dream of every couple that thinks they'll last forever. I started checking our credit card statements with the dedication of a forensic accountant. And let me tell you, the story they told was better than any mystery novel. Charges at hotels I'd never been to. The Riverside Inn. The boutique on Fifth. Places with names that promised discretion and probably had hourly rates even though they pretended not to. $200 here. $300 there. All on our shared card, because apparently Camille's affair needed my financial contribution to really thrive. Restaurants I'd never eaten at. Expensive ones. The kind where the menu doesn't have prices and you need a second mortgage to afford the wine list. Fleming's Steakhouse, $283. Catch Seafood, $315. She was whining and dining this guy on my dime, probably ordering the lobster and laughing about how her husband was at home eating leftover pasta and watching reruns of The Office. But the absolute kicker? The purchase that made me actually laugh out loud when I found it, sitting there in our transaction history like a neon sign advertising my wife's audacity. A Rolex. She'd bought Dylan a freaking Rolex. $11,600. From Baxter's Fine Jewelry downtown. I had to sit down when I saw that one. Actually had to take a seat and process the sheer magnitude of the disrespect. I was driving a 7-year-old Honda Civic with a check engine light I'd been ignoring for 3 months because I couldn't afford the repair. But sure, Dylan breathed deep needed a Rolex. For teaching people to stretch. For being enlightened. For sleeping with someone else's wife. For a guy who taught stretching for a living, he was really, really good at reaching into my wallet. I took screenshots of everything. Every hotel charge. Every restaurant bill. Every piece of jewelry that I definitely hadn't received. Built a digital file folder titled Tax Documents 2023 because Camille never looked at anything related to taxes. She'd rather get audited by the IRS than voluntarily open a spreadsheet. I even found their hotel reservation confirmations in her email. She'd gotten sloppy, using our shared laptop one evening while I pretended to watch TV. The Riverside Inn. Valentine's Day weekend. While I'd been at a work conference in Phoenix, she'd been playing house with Yoga Boy in a suite with a hot tub. The reservation was under Mr. and Mrs. Dylan Thompson. Mrs. Dylan Thompson. She'd even practiced being his wife. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, smiled. Everything okay? Camille asked from the kitchen, where she was making herself a green tea that probably cost more per ounce than gold. Perfect, I said. Just checking some work stuff. Don't work too hard, she called back, voice dripping with false concern. Wouldn't dream of it, I replied. Captain looked up at me from his spot on the floor, tail wagging. At least someone in this house was honest. Finding a good divorce lawyer is like finding a good therapist. You need someone who won't judge you for your terrible life choices, but will absolutely help you make better ones going forward. I found Rita Collins through a Google search at 2 in the morning while Camille was snoring beside me, probably dreaming about downward dogs and betrayal. The search terms were specific: best divorce lawyer near me, aggressive divorce attorney, and my personal favorite, lawyer who will destroy my cheating spouse legally. Rita's website came up first. 5 stars on every review platform. Testimonials that read like victory speeches. Rita got me everything. She's a shark in a pantsuit. My ex-husband cried during mediation. That last one sold me. I wanted tears. I wanted justice. I wanted someone who understood that sometimes being nice gets you nowhere except divorced and broke. I called her office the next morning from my car during lunch break, parked in the construction site lot where nobody could overhear me plotting the dismantling of my marriage. Her receptionist answered on the second ring. Collins Legal Group. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with Rita Collins about a divorce. Are you a current client? Not yet, but I will be if she's half as good as her reviews say. There was a pause, then a slight laugh. Hold please. 30 seconds later, a voice came on the line that could have cut glass. This is Rita Collins. I understand you're interested in dissolving a marriage. Dissolving sounds so polite, I said. I'm interested in legally obliterating one. Another pause. Then, come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring every financial document you have access to. Bank statements, credit cards, mortgage papers, tax returns, investment accounts. Everything. Don't leave anything out, even if you think it's irrelevant. Especially if you think it's irrelevant. That's a lot of paperwork. That's what winning looks like, Mr. Gray. Milo Gray. Well, Mr. Gray, if you want to walk away from this with your dignity and your assets intact, you'll bring the paperwork. Otherwise, we're just having an expensive conversation about your feelings, and I charge $350 an hour for that. I liked her immediately. The next morning, I showed up at her office with a banker's box full of documents I'd spent the previous evening organizing while Camille was at another girls' night that probably involved less girl and more Dylan. Rita's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown that screamed success. Marble floors, abstract art that cost more than my car, a waiting room with leather chairs that didn't squeak when you sat down. Rita herself was exactly what I expected and somehow more. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost what I made in a month. Dark hair pulled back in a bun so tight it could have been a facelift. She had the kind of eyes that missed nothing and forgave even less. When she shook my hand, her grip was firmer than most men's. Mr. Gray, sit. I sat, placed the box on her desk. She opened it, started pulling out documents with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Walk me through your situation. Start from the beginning. Don't embellish. Don't leave anything out because you're embarrassed. I've heard worse, I promise. So I told her. Everything. The smartwatch. The hotel charges. The $11,000 Rolex for a yoga instructor named Dylan Breathe Deep, who probably thought Namaste was Sanskrit for your wife, my girlfriend. Rita didn't interrupt, just took notes on a legal pad with handwriting so precise it looked typed. When I finished, she looked up. You want revenge or justice? I'd thought about this question during the sleepless hours between discovering the affair and actually doing something about it. Revenge was tempting. Public humiliation, scorched earth, making sure everyone knew what Camille had done. Justice was cleaner, getting what I deserved legally, walking away whole. Why not both? Rita smiled. Actually smiled. It was terrifying and reassuring at the same time. I was hoping you'd say that. Let's get to work. We spent the next 3 hours going through every document I'd brought. And that's when the real story emerged. The one that made me go from heartbroken husband to genuinely angry human being. Camille had been moving money. Our money. Joint account funds that were supposed to be for household expenses, emergency savings, future plans. She'd been systematically transferring them to her personal account. Small amounts at first. 500 here. 1,000 there. Nothing that would trigger immediate alarm bells. But over the last 6 months, she'd moved nearly $40,000. Look at this, Rita said, pointing to a series of transactions. She's been documenting expenses she claims you made. High-end electronics, gambling debts, bar tabs. See these notes in the transaction history. I leaned forward. Sure enough, there were memos attached to several transfers. Milo's poker night, $800. Milo's new gaming system, $200. Covering Milo's bar tab again, $650. I don't play poker, I said flatly. I don't have a gaming system. And I haven't been to a bar in 6 months because I've been too busy being a perfect husband while she destroyed our marriage. I know, Rita said. She's building a case, making it look like you're financially irresponsible. That way, when the divorce happens, she can argue she needs more because you've been bleeding the accounts dry. I couldn't even finish the sentence. The audacity was breathtaking. That's fraud, Rita finished. And it's going to be her downfall. Here's what we're going to do. What we did was methodical, surgical. Rita helped me freeze our joint accounts, legally, citing suspected fraudulent activity, which wasn't even a lie. We collected evidence of every false transaction, every fabricated expense. Rita had a forensic accountant friend named Marcus who looked like an accountant, khakis, glasses, the personality of a tax form, but had the investigative skills of the FBI. Marcus traced where the money actually went. Not to cover my fictional gambling addiction or bar tabs. To hotels, restaurants, jewelry stores. To fund Camille's affair while simultaneously framing me as the irresponsible one. This is good, Rita said during our third meeting, reviewing Marcus's report. This is very good. For you, I mean. Terrible for her. How terrible? The kind of terrible that makes judges very angry. Marital assets used to fund an extramarital affair while falsifying records to frame the innocent spouse? That's a highlight reel of what not to do in a divorce. We worked in secret. I'd take long lunches, claiming I needed to clear my head. Camille didn't question it. She was probably relieved to have me out of the house, giving her more time to text Dylan about his chakras or whatever they discussed between sessions of ruining my life. Rita and I developed a strategy. We'd wait. Let Camille think she was winning. Let her keep moving money, keep building her false narrative. Every transaction was more evidence. Every lie was another nail in her coffin. The key, Rita explained, is patience. She thinks you're oblivious. Let her keep thinking that. Meanwhile, we're building an airtight case that will leave her with nothing and you with everything. Everything. The house, the car, the accounts, maybe even spousal support if we play this right. Though I suspect you'd rather cut off your arm than take money from her. You suspect correctly. Pride is expensive in divorce, Mr. Gray. Call me Milo. And I'll take the pride hit if it means watching her face when she realizes she lost. Rita closed the file folder. I think we're going to get along just fine. While Camille thought I was home watching football and being the clueless husband she'd married, I was actually watching her world unravel one bank statement at a time. I became fluent in legal terminology, learned about asset division and marital misconduct, spent evenings reviewing documents Rita sent over encrypted email. Captain would sit beside me, head on my lap, providing moral support. We're gonna be okay, buddy, I'd tell him. Better than okay. He'd wag his tail like he believed me. Smart dog. If acting was measured by how well you could pretend your life wasn't imploding while smiling through gritted teeth, I deserved every award Hollywood had to offer. I became the perfect husband again. Not just good, perfect. The kind of husband that makes other wives point at their men and say, "Why can't you be more like him?" It was a performance for the ages, and Camille had front row seats without even realizing she was watching a show. I started bringing her breakfast in bed. Not just coffee and toast. I'm talking the whole production. Scrambled eggs with chives. Turkey bacon because she'd decided regular bacon was too inflammatory. Fresh squeezed orange juice that required me to wake up 30 minutes early just to wrestle with citrus fruit like I was training for some kind of agricultural combat. I'd arrange everything on a tray with a cloth napkin. We had cloth napkins now, apparently that was a thing, and deliver it with a smile that should have won me a Golden Globe. "You're so sweet," she'd say, barely looking up from her phone. Probably texting Dylan about their next hotel rendezvous or whatever spiritual journey they were planning. What's the occasion? No occasion. Just wanted to do something nice for my wife. My wife. The words tasted like battery acid, but I said them anyway because that's what Oscar-nominated husbands do. They commit to the role. I complimented her hair. Every single day. "Your hair looks amazing. Did you do something different? It's gorgeous. That style really suits you." It didn't matter that she'd had the same haircut for 2 years. I acted like every day was a revelation in follicular excellence. She'd blush, play with her ends, soak up the attention like a cactus in a rainstorm. Meanwhile, Rita was sending me updates via encrypted messages that looked like work emails. Regarding the Johnson project, Phase 2 complete. Translation. We've successfully moved the house deed into your sole name using a legal loophole involving a refinance you signed off on 3 years ago that Camille forgot about. The quarterly reports look favorable. Translation. Your retirement accounts are now protected and she can't touch them. I even went to her charity gala. The annual Glow for Good event that her company hosted every year to raise money for something. I could never remember what because the cause changed depending on what was trending. This year it was ocean conservation, which was ironic considering Camille's moral compass had been underwater for months. The gala was at the Grandview Hotel ballroom, the kind of place where a glass of wine costs $20 and they call it an investment in the cause. I wore my best suit, the same navy one I'd wear later to our anniversary dinner, and played the role of supportive spouse so convincingly that strangers came up to tell Camille how lucky she was. "You've got a good one," an older woman named Margaret said, patting Camille's arm. Margaret was on the board of directors, had more money than God, and wore pearls that probably cost more than my annual salary. So attentive, so present. You don't see that much anymore. "I know," Camille said, smiling at me with those perfect white teeth she'd had professionally bleached. "I'm very fortunate." Fortunate. That was the word she used. Like I was a lottery ticket she'd scratched off and won instead of a human being she'd systematically betrayed for half a year. I smiled back, squeezed her hand, thought about the spreadsheet Rita had shown me earlier that day detailing every fraudulent transaction. "We're both lucky," I said. Dylan was there too, because of course he was. He'd come as someone's plus one, a woman named Jennifer who worked in Camille's department and clearly had no idea her date was actively sleeping with her co-worker's husband. He wore a suit that looked rented and didn't quite fit, like he'd grabbed it off the rack an hour before the event. His man bun was extra tight, pulled back so severely I wondered if it was cutting off circulation to his brain. Not that there was much up there to circulate. I watched them try not to look at each other. It was painful. Amateur hour. They'd make eye contact across the room, then quickly look away like teenagers caught passing notes in class. At one point, Camille excused herself to go to the bathroom, and exactly 90 seconds later, Dylan did the same. They weren't even trying to be subtle. I waited 5 minutes, then followed. Not into the bathroom. I'm not a creep. But I positioned myself near the hallway where I could see them emerge. Sure enough, they came out together, Camille adjusting her dress, Dylan looking like he'd just won a prize at a carnival. They exchanged a quick word. She touched his arm, and then they went separate ways. I pulled out my phone, took a photo of the hallway bathroom entrance with timestamps, sent it to Rita with a simple message. More evidence. She replied immediately. Perfect. Keep it up. Back at the table, Camille's mother Patricia had arrived. Patricia was everything you'd imagine in a future mother-in-law designed to make your life miserable, critical, judgmental, with the kind of voice that could make compliments sound like insults. She wore designer everything and had opinions about everything else. Milo, she said, air kissing near my cheeks without actually touching me because God forbid. You look well. Still at that construction company. Project management, yes. Still there. That was Patricia's signature sound, which could mean anything from mild disapproval to active disgust. And they haven't promoted you yet? Camille mentioned you've been there for what, 6 years? 7 years. She sipped her wine like it personally offended her. You know, Camille's father was VP by 32. Just something to think about. Camille's father had also inherited his position from his father, but pointing that out would have required Patricia to acknowledge that nepotism existed, and that wasn't the kind of reality she lived in. I'll keep that in mind, Patricia. Thank you. You're lucky she tolerates you. Patricia continued, because apparently we weren't done. My daughter could have married anyone. She had options. I smiled. Actually smiled. A real, genuine smile that came from somewhere deep in my soul where I'd stored every ounce of patience I had left. You're absolutely right, Patricia. She did have options. And she chose me. Isn't that something? Patricia's face did this thing where she couldn't decide if I was being sincere or sarcastic. She settled on her default expression, mild constipation, and turned back to her salad. Camille reached over and squeezed my hand. Thanks for being here, she whispered. I know these events aren't your thing. Anything for you, I whispered back. And I meant it. Anything to make sure you think I'm completely oblivious while Rita and I build the legal equivalent of a nuclear bomb with your name on it. The next week, I took Camille to her favorite Italian restaurant, Lorenzo's, a place in Little Italy where the pasta was handmade and the waiters acted like they were doing you a favor by bringing food. We sat outside on the patio under string lights that were supposed to be romantic, but mostly just attracted moths. This is nice, she said, twirling linguine around her fork. We should do this more often. Definitely. I agreed, cutting into my chicken parmesan. I feel like we've been disconnected lately. I want to work on us. The lie came out so smoothly, I almost believed it myself. Me too, she said, and I wondered if she actually believed what she was saying or if she was also acting. Maybe we were both frauds at this point, just sitting across from each other delivering lines in a play neither of us wanted to be in. By then, Rita had helped me quietly transfer everything valuable. The house was in my name, sole ownership, thanks to that refinance paperwork and a technicality involving primary mortgage holders. The car, a newer Honda CR-V Camille had insisted we buy last year, was registered to me. The bank accounts that hadn't been frozen were emptied and redistributed into accounts she didn't know existed. Every asset we'd built together was slowly, methodically, legally being moved out of her reach. How's work? I asked, because that's what husbands ask. Busy. The new campaign is kicking my ass. Late nights, all week. Late nights with Dylan, more likely. But I nodded sympathetically. That's rough. You're working so hard. Someone has to, she said, and there it was, the little dig. The implication that I wasn't pulling my weight. That she was the ambitious one, the successful one, while I was just Milo. Reliable, boring Milo who paid the bills and did the laundry and apparently didn't have enough hustle. I let it slide, took a sip of wine, smiled. You're right, I said. I should probably work on that. Camille looked surprised. She'd expected me to argue, to defend myself. Instead, I agreed. Disarmed her completely. Well, she said, softening slightly. I didn't mean. No, you're right. I could be better. I'll try harder. She reached across the table, put her hand on mine. Her wedding ring, the one I'd saved for 6 months to buy, caught the light. I appreciate you, Milo. I really do. Sure you do, I thought. About as much as you appreciate a doormat. But I smiled, squeezed her hand back. I love you too. The waiter brought dessert. Tiramisu we'd share. I watched Camille take the first bite, watched her enjoy something I was paying for, probably thinking about Dylan and their next escape. My phone buzzed. A text from Rita. Everything's in place. When you're ready. I put the phone away, looked at my wife. My cheating, lying, fraudulent wife who thought I was too dumb to notice, too weak to fight back, too comfortable to leave. She thought I was dumb. And you know what? She was half right. I was dumb enough to marry her. But I was smart enough to make her regret it. Dylan breathed deep. Even his name annoyed me. It wasn't just a name. It was a lifestyle brand, a philosophy, a cry for help wrapped in spiritual pseudo-wisdom. I'd done my research, because when your wife is cheating on you with someone, you become intimately familiar with every detail of their miserable existence. Dylan had a website. Of course he had a website. It was called Awaken Movement with Dylan, and featured photos of him in various yoga poses on beaches at sunset, looking contemplative in a way that suggested he'd never had an original thought in his life, but was really proud of the motivational quotes he'd stolen from Instagram. His bio was a masterpiece of vague spiritual nonsense. Dylan guides souls toward their authentic selves through mindful movement and intentional breathing. Translation: he teaches people to stretch while saying things that sound deep but mean nothing. His credentials included a 200-hour yoga teacher certification from someplace in Bali, because of course it was Bali, and training in energy healing, which I'm pretty sure isn't a real thing, but sounds impressive to people who shop at Whole Foods and own crystals. He'd been texting Camille constantly. I knew because I'd started checking her phone whenever she left it unattended, which was more often than you'd think for someone conducting a secret affair. She'd gotten sloppy, comfortable. That's what happens when you think your husband is too stupid to notice. You stop being careful. The messages were nauseating. You are my peace, he'd write, like he was composing poetry instead of home wrecking. Your energy is transformative. I feel most aligned when I'm with you. Aligned. The man talked about their relationship like it was a chakra adjustment. And Camille ate it up. You make me feel alive, she'd respond. I've never felt this connected to anyone. Which was interesting because I distinctly remembered our wedding vows where she'd promised to feel connected to me for the rest of her life. Apparently that warranty had expired. But my favorite, and by favorite I mean the one that made me want to throw my phone into traffic, was when Dylan sent, "You deserve someone who sees your light." Buddy, I paid the electricity bill that powered her light. I'd been seeing it for 7 years. But sure, tell me more about illumination while you're sleeping with someone else's wife in hotels I'm financing. I decided to follow them. Not in a creepy stalker way, in a justified, evidence-gathering, preparing for legal warfare way. There's a difference. One gets you a restraining order, the other gets you a favorable divorce settlement. It was a Thursday evening, girls' night, according to Camille's calendar. She'd left the house wearing black jeans that could have been painted on and a top that definitely wasn't appropriate for hanging out with Becky unless Becky had suddenly developed an interest in seduction. Her perfume, the expensive one I'd bought her for Christmas, lingered in the hallway long after she'd gone. I waited 5 minutes. Fed Captain, who looked at me with those knowing eyes that suggested even the dog thought this was a terrible idea. "I'll be back, buddy. Hold down the fort." He tilted his head, probably wondering why I was talking to him like he understood complex instructions. But dogs are good listeners, and at that point, he was the only honest relationship I had. I followed Camille's car, the CRV I'd been making payments on, from a safe distance. She was a terrible driver, constantly checking her phone at red lights, switching lanes without signaling, the kind of person who made everyone else's commute dangerous. She headed downtown, past the business district, into the trendy part of the city where everything was overpriced, and underportioned. She parked near a rooftop bar called Elevation. How fitting. A place literally named after height for people who thought they were above everyone else. I parked 3 blocks away and walked back. The bar was on the 5th floor of a converted warehouse that now housed artisanal coffee shops and boutiques selling $70 candles. I took the elevator up, walked into a scene that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd seen too many movies about rich people having midlife crises. String lights everywhere. Edison bulbs hanging from exposed beams. A bartender with a waxed mustache making cocktails that probably had names like The Ascending Spirit or Conscious Connection. The kind of place where a beer costs $15 and they serve it in a mason jar because apparently we're all farmers now. And there they were, Camille and Dylan, sitting at a corner table with a view of the city skyline, acting like a budget version of Romeo and Juliet. Except Romeo had a man bun, and Juliet was married to someone else who was currently watching them from behind a decorative plant 20 feet away. Dylan looked exactly like his photos, the kind of handsome that came from good genetics and an obsessive gym routine. Tall, lean, with that infuriating yoga body that suggested he'd never eaten a carb in his life. He wore a linen shirt. Who wears linen? And those beaded bracelets that spiritual guys think make them interesting. His hair was pulled back in that signature man bun, secured with what looked like a wooden hair tie because plastic was probably too corporate for his aesthetic. They were holding hands across the table, actually holding hands like teenagers at a school dance. Camille was laughing at something he'd said, that genuine laugh I hadn't heard in months. The laugh I used to work for, back when I thought making my wife happy was an achievable goal instead of a losing battle. Dylan leaned forward, said something that made her blush. Then he did the move, you know the move. The one where the guy brushes a strand of hair behind the woman's ear like he's in a Nicholas Sparks adaptation. It's supposed to be romantic, but really it's just performative. Look at me being tender. Look at me being present. Look at me ruining someone else's marriage while pretending to be enlightened. I pulled out my phone, started recording, got video of them holding hands, the hairbrush, the way Camille looked at him like he'd hung the moon instead of just teaching people to touch their toes. Then they kissed, right there on the rooftop. Not a peck, a full-on, passionate, we're definitely sleeping together later, kiss that made the couple at the next table uncomfortable enough to look away. I got it all on video. Every second. The lighting was perfect, golden hour, that magic time photographers love. Except instead of capturing a beautiful moment, I was documenting a betrayal that would soon be evidence in court. A waitress came by their table. I couldn't hear what they ordered, but knowing Dylan, probably something organic and locally sourced with a side of self-righteousness. Maybe a kale salad. Maybe a quinoa bowl. Definitely something that tasted like virtue signaling. They stayed for 2 hours. I watched from different vantage points around the bar, always keeping a decorative object or group of people between us. I'd become surprisingly good at surveillance. Who knew betrayal came with a free education in investigative techniques? At one point, Dylan pulled out his phone and showed Camille something that made her laugh so hard she snorted. That snort. I used to love that snort. It was the sound she made when something was genuinely funny, not just politely amusing. Now she was snorting at Dylan's phone like he'd shown her the funniest thing in human history. Probably a meme about chakras. When they finally left, they walked to the parking garage together. Separate cars, but they stopped between the vehicles for one more kiss. This one lasted even longer. I got photos from across the street, hidden behind a bus stop advertisement for injury lawyers. The irony wasn't lost on me, standing behind a billboard that asked "been wronged," while documenting exactly how wrong I'd been. After they separated, I followed Dylan. Not Camille. I already knew where she'd go. She'd drive home, come in around 11, say girls' night was fun, and head straight to bed without kissing me goodnight. I could have written the script. But Dylan? Dylan was new territory. He drove a Prius. Of course he drove a Prius. Probably told people it was about environmental consciousness and not about gas mileage. His car had bumper stickers, Namaste, Coexist, and my personal favorite, Good vibes only. Real good vibes, buddy. Nothing says positive energy like destroying marriages. He lived in a complex called the Zen Gardens. I'm not making that up. It was one of those modern apartment buildings with a yoga studio in the lobby and a rooftop garden where people grew herbs they'd never use. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, number 304. I could see the lights turn on, could see his silhouette through the curtains as he moved around. I sat in my car, looked at the photos and videos I'd taken, looked at the building where the man who was sleeping with my wife lived, probably surrounded by meditation cushions and essential oil diffusers. My phone buzzed. Rita, how'd it go? I sent her everything. Every photo, every video, the footage from the rooftop bar, the parking garage kiss, even a screenshot of Dylan's ridiculous bumper stickers. She called immediately. This is gold, Milo. Absolute gold. We can use this. Good, I said. Because I'm done playing nice. Not yet, you're not, Rita said. We're close, but we need a little more time. Let her think she's winning. Let her get comfortable. Then we strike. How much longer? 2 weeks. Maybe 3. Can you hold out? I looked at Dylan's apartment. Thought about Camille at home, probably texting him already. Thought about the $11,000 Rolex and the hotel rooms, and the lies stacked so high they could have reached this rooftop bar. Yeah, I said. I can hold out. That's my client. Go home. Pet your dog. Get some sleep. We're almost there. I drove home. Captain was waiting at the door, tail wagging like I'd been gone for years instead of hours. Good news, buddy, I said, scratching behind his ears. We got him. Captain barked. He always was the smartest one in the house. 1 week before our anniversary, Camille did something she hadn't done in 6 months. She touched me, voluntarily, without me initiating it or begging for scraps of affection like a lonely golden retriever. I was making coffee, my usual morning routine that involved stumbling around half awake while trying not to burn the house down, when she came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist. I nearly dropped the coffee pot. Morning, she said, her voice doing that soft, affectionate thing it used to do back when we were happy. Or at least when I thought we were happy. Turns out I'm terrible at reading the room, especially when the room is my own marriage. Morning. I managed, trying to process this physical contact that felt as foreign as a hug from a stranger on the subway. She rested her head against my back. Actually rested it there like we were in some kind of romantic comedy montage. I was thinking, she said. Our anniversary is coming up. Oh, I knew. I'd been counting down the days like a prisoner marking time on a cell wall. 7 more days until whatever she had planned. 7 more days of pretending I didn't know my marriage was a theatrical production and I was the only one who hadn't read the script. It is, I said carefully. 3 years. 3 years, she repeated, like she was tasting the words. That's significant. Significant. That was one word for it. Other words included fraudulent, exhausting, and the biggest mistake of my adult life. But sure, let's go with significant. She pulled away, came around to face me. Her eyes, those same blue eyes I'd fallen for at a coffee shop 7 years ago when she'd accidentally grabbed my latte and apologized with a smile that made me forget my own name, were looking at me with something that resembled warmth. I want to do something special, she said. Celebrate properly. Just the 2 of us. Just the 2 of us. If only that were true. If only Dylan breathed deep wasn't a part of this equation, lurking in the background like a yoga-practicing homewrecker with good hair and bad boundaries. That sounds great, I said, because that's what you say when your cheating wife suggests celebrating the anniversary of your sham marriage. You smile. You agree. You play along. I made reservations, she continued. Somewhere meaningful. Somewhere that matters to us. My stomach dropped. I knew before she said it. Somehow I just knew. Maison du Loon. 8 o'clock next Friday. Maison du Loon. The French restaurant where I proposed. Where I'd gotten down on one knee in front of strangers and asked her to marry me, and she'd cried and said yes. And everyone applauded like we were the beginning of a beautiful love story instead of a cautionary tale about ignoring red flags. She wanted to end it where it began. There was a poetry to it, I had to admit. A sick, twisted poetry that only a narcissist would appreciate. That's perfect, I said, and I meant it. Not because I wanted to celebrate, but because if she was planning some kind of public spectacle, and based on her recent behavior, she absolutely was, then I needed to be ready. Rita and I had been preparing for weeks. We had evidence. We had legal documentation. We had everything except the right moment. Camille was about to hand me that moment on a silver platter at an overpriced French restaurant. I've invited a few people, she added, almost casually, like she was mentioning she'd picked up milk at the store. Just some close friends. Becky, obviously, and a few others. I thought it would be nice to celebrate with people we love. People we love. Right. Becky, who had the emotional intelligence of a car horn. And a few others, which undoubtedly included Dylan. Because why would you destroy your husband privately when you could do it publicly with your boyfriend in attendance? Sounds great, I said again. I was really getting good at this lying thing. Maybe I'd missed my calling. Forget project management. I should have been an actor. She kissed my cheek. Actually kissed it. The affection was so unexpected I almost flinched. You're the best, Milo. I'm lucky to have you. For now, I thought. But I smiled. I'm lucky too. She floated out of the kitchen, literally floated, like someone who'd just planned the perfect crime and was feeling really good about it. I stood there with my coffee, staring at the space she'd occupied, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. Rita. Her timing was impeccable. Emergency meeting. My office. 1 hour. I texted back. She made her move. Anniversary dinner. Public setting. Multiple witnesses. Rita's response was immediate. Perfect. Come now. We need to prepare your countermove. I called in sick to work, told Gerald I had food poisoning, which wasn't entirely a lie because my stomach was definitely rejecting reality. Then I drove to Rita's office, where she was waiting with coffee that was significantly better than mine and a plan that was significantly more satisfying than anything I could have come up with alone. She's going to serve you divorce papers, Rita said, sitting across from me at her intimidatingly clean desk. Publicly. In front of friends. Probably recorded. She wants humiliation. She wants you broken. I figured. But here's what she doesn't know. Rita pulled out a small device from her desk drawer. It looked like a regular pen, black, sleek, professional. Except it wasn't a pen. Pen camera. Video and audio recording. Battery life of 4 hours. Connects to your phone via Bluetooth. Everything it records uploads directly to cloud storage that only you and I can access. I took the pen, turned it over in my hands. It was lighter than I expected. You're going to wear your suit jacket, Rita continued. The navy one. This pen goes in your breast pocket. Right here. She pointed to her own chest. Positioned so the camera faces outward. You'll record everything. Her serving the papers. Her friends celebrating. Dylan. He'll be there, won't he? Guaranteed. Good. Record him too. Record all of it. Whatever speech she gives, whatever humiliation she's planned, you document it. Every second. And then, Rita smiled. That terrifying, beautiful smile that meant someone was about to have a very bad day, and it wasn't going to be me. Then you give them a show they'll never forget. I've prepared something special. A little surprise that'll be showing on your phone, which you'll conveniently project onto the restaurant screens. They have TV screens there, don't they? In the bar area. For sports. Perfect. You're going to excuse yourself during the dinner. Bathroom break. Whatever. You're going to connect to their system. I'll send you instructions and queue up a special video compilation. All those photos and videos you took of Camille and Dylan. Set to music, even. I'm thinking something classical. Really lean into the drama. I stared at her. You made a video? I made a masterpiece. When you're ready, after you've signed whatever papers she gives you, after she thinks she's won, you press play. The whole restaurant sees it. Her friends see it. Dylan sees it. Most importantly, Camille sees it. And sees everyone else seeing it. I couldn't find the words. Evil? Brilliant? Both? Justice, Rita finished. That's justice. She wants to humiliate you publicly? Fine. But she's forgetting one crucial detail. What's that? You have evidence. She doesn't. We spent the next 2 hours going over the plan. Rita walked me through the technical aspects. How to position the pen camera, how to connect to the restaurant's Wi-Fi, how to cast from my phone to their screens. She'd even called ahead, pretending to be planning an event, and gotten the Wi-Fi password from their catering manager. Practice this at home, she instructed. Multiple times. You need to be smooth. Confident. If you fumble with the technology, you lose the impact. I won't fumble. Good. Because this is your one shot. You mess it up, she wins. You nail it. You walk away from this marriage with your dignity, your assets, and the satisfaction of knowing she lost everything. I practiced that night, and the next night, and every night leading up to Friday. I'd stand in front of my bathroom mirror with the pen in my pocket, pretending to receive divorce papers, pretending to sign them, then walking through the motions of pulling out my phone and connecting to an imaginary screen. Captain watched these rehearsals with what I can only describe as concern. It's fine, buddy, I'd tell him. I'm not having a breakdown. I'm having a breakthrough. He'd tilt his head. Dogs are judgmental creatures when they want to be. Camille got more affectionate as the week went on. She'd touch my arm when talking, smile at me across the dinner table, ask about my day like she actually cared. It was the kind of behavior that would have thrilled me 6 months ago. Now it just felt like a predator playing with food before the kill. Thursday night. She was in the bathroom getting ready for bed when her phone lit up on the nightstand. A text from Becky. Tomorrow's going to be epic. He has no idea, LOL. I took a photo of the screen. Sent it to Rita. She replied, "Oh, he has an idea. See you at showtime." Friday morning arrived. Camille woke up early, practically bouncing with energy. "Big day," she said, kissing my forehead before heading to the shower. "Big day," I agreed. I got dressed carefully. Navy suit, white shirt, the pen camera positioned perfectly in my breast pocket. I checked my phone. Rita had sent the video file labeled anniversary_surprise.mp4. I downloaded it, tested the Wi-Fi connection. Everything worked flawlessly. Before leaving, I knelt down to captain's level. "Wish me luck, buddy." He licked my face. "Good enough." At 7:45 p.m., I pulled into the parking lot of Maison du Loon, the same restaurant where I'd promised forever, the same place where that forever was about to officially end. But this time I was ready. This time, I was writing the ending. Walking into Maison du Loon felt like voluntarily entering my own funeral, except I was the only one who knew I'd be walking back out alive. The hostess, a different one from the proposal night 3 years ago, thank God, because I didn't need someone recognizing me and asking about how married life was treating me, led me through the restaurant with that professional smile that said she'd seen too many relationship disasters unfold between these walls. The dining room looked exactly the same. Exposed brick walls trying too hard to be rustic. Chandeliers that probably cost more than my car. White tablecloths so crisp they could cut you. The smell of expensive food that would leave you hungry an hour later because French cuisine believed in portion sizes appropriate for toddlers, not grown men who'd skipped lunch because their stomach was doing Olympic-level gymnastics. And there she was. Center table. Maximum visibility. Camille had positioned herself like a queen holding court, and her loyal subjects had already assembled. Becky was there, wearing that bedazzled disaster of a dress that looked like a disco ball had exploded in a craft store. She was already 3 glasses deep into the wine. I could tell by the volume of her laugh, which had reached frequencies only dogs and bartenders could fully appreciate. Next to Becky sat 2 other women I vaguely recognized from Camille's work events. Jennifer, the one who'd brought Dylan to the charity gala without knowing she was enabling adultery, and someone named Sarah who I'd met exactly once at a company picnic where she'd spent 20 minutes telling me about her juice cleanse. Real fun at parties, that's Sarah. And then there was Dylan. Of course Dylan was there. He sat to Camille's left, his arm casually draped across the back of her chair like he paid rent there. The man bun was extra aggressive tonight, pulled so tight I wondered if his eyebrows were permanently surprised. He wore a button-down shirt, probably linen, definitely wrinkled in that "I'm too spiritual to care about ironing" way, and those beaded bracelets that I'd seen in every photo, like they were part of his skeletal structure. They all looked up when I approached. Camille's smile was radiant. Practiced. The kind of smile you give someone right before you stab them in the back, except she was going for the front this time. More dramatic that way. "Milo," she exclaimed, standing up to kiss my cheek. The performance had begun. "You look great." "Doesn't he look great, everyone?" A chorus of agreement from the table. "Sure, I look great." Nothing says attractive quite like a man walking into his own ambush wearing his funeral suit. "Thanks," I said, taking my seat. The chair directly across from Camille. Perfect positioning for maximum humiliation. She'd thought of everything. The waitress came by, young, eager, probably working her way through college and definitely not paid enough to witness whatever was about to happen. She took drink orders. Camille ordered champagne for the table. "We're celebrating," she announced to no one and everyone. "Celebrating what?" I asked, playing my part perfectly. Clueless husband. Totally oblivious. Oscar-worthy performance. Becky giggled. Actually giggled like we were in middle school and someone had passed a note about crushes. "You'll see," she said, her voice hitting a pitch that made the wine glasses vibrate. The champagne arrived. 6 glasses. Camille raised hers first, standing up because apparently sitting down wasn't theatrical enough. The pen camera in my breast pocket was recording every second. I could feel its slight weight against my chest, a reminder that I wasn't as defenseless as I looked. To new beginnings, Camille announced, her voice carrying across the restaurant. Other diners looked over, curious about the celebration. Her friends raised their glasses. To new beginnings, they echoed. Then Becky, never one to miss an opportunity to be the loudest person in any room, added her own toast. To his new king. The table erupted in laughter. Planned laughter. Rehearsed laughter. They'd practiced this. Actually sat around and practiced how they'd humiliate me. I blinked. Looked around the table. Let the confusion show on my face because that's what they expected. Wait, That's when I saw it clearly. Dylan's arm wasn't just near Camille anymore. It was around her. Possessively. Proudly. Like he'd won a prize at a carnival. Except the prize was my wife and the carnival was my personal hell. Camille reached into her designer purse, the Michael Kors bag I'd bought her for her birthday, because I'm a generous idiot, and pulled out a manila envelope. Crisp. Professional. Definitely expensive legal stationery because even betrayal has production values. She slid it across the table toward me with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested she'd watched too many legal dramas. The envelope landed in front of my champagne glass. "Happy anniversary, Milo," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. I picked it up. My hands were steady. Rita had made me practice this part too. Don't shake. Don't show weakness. Just open it calmly like you're checking the mail. Inside were divorce papers. Neat, organized, already filled out with her lawyer's information prominently displayed. She'd even used those little sticky tabs to mark where I needed to sign. Efficient. Professional. The same organizational skills she used to plan dinner parties, now applied to dismantling our marriage. The table was watching. All of them. Waiting for my reaction. Waiting for tears, anger, a dramatic outburst they could record on their phones and post about later. You won't believe what happened at dinner tonight. But I didn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I looked at the papers. Actually read them, taking my time. The restaurant had gone quieter. Other diners sensing drama. That universal human instinct to watch car crashes and relationship implosions. Well, I said finally, pulling out a pen from my jacket. Not the camera pen, an actual pen I'd brought specifically for this moment. I guess we're doing this. Camille looked surprised. She'd expected resistance. Begging maybe. Definitely not calm acceptance. You're going to sign? Just like that. What else would I do? I asked, finding the first signature line. You clearly want this. You've obviously put a lot of thought into it. Who am I to stand in the way of your happiness? I signed the first page, then the second, then the third, methodically, calmly, while the table watched in increasingly confused silence. This wasn't the script they'd written. The husband was supposed to fight back, make a scene, give them something to talk about. Dylan looked uncomfortable. Good. I hoped he was squirming in his linen shirt, realizing that maybe this was happening too easily, that something fell off. When I finished signing, I slid the papers back across the table, looked Camille directly in the eyes, those blue eyes that had once made me forget my own name, now just reminding me of every lie she'd told. Thank you, I said quietly. Sincerely. Thank you for the show. This has been incredibly enlightening. The table stirred. Whispers. Confused glances. Camille's smile flickered. That's it, Becky said, disappointed. You're just okay with this? Why wouldn't I be? I stood up, straightening my tie, the pen camera capturing everything from my breast pocket. She wants to be with Dylan. Dylan wants to be with her. Everyone's getting what they want. It's practically a fairy tale. I picked up my champagne glass, took a sip, let them sit in the uncomfortable silence. Actually, I said, setting the glass down, since we're celebrating new beginnings and everyone's being so honest tonight, I have something too. A little anniversary surprise of my own. Camille's face changed. Just slightly. A flicker of uncertainty. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone. Well, you shared your news. Only seems fair I share mine. The restaurant had a large TV screen in the bar area, visible from most tables. They usually showed sports, football, basketball, whatever game was on. But tonight they were about to show something much more interesting. I'd practiced this part 50 times. Connecting to their Wi-Fi took 3 seconds. Finding the casting option took 2 more. Pulling up the video file Rita had prepared, The masterpiece compilation of every photo and video I'd taken of Camille and Dylan over the past weeks. Took another 3. What are you doing? Camille asked, her voice rising slightly. The confidence cracking. Sharing, I said simply. Isn't that what we're doing tonight? Sharing our truth. I pressed play. The screen flickered. The restaurant's sports highlight reel disappeared. In its place, a video began, set to classical music. Rita had chosen Vivaldi's Winter, which was perfect because it was cold, dramatic, and about to freeze everyone in this restaurant. The first image appeared. Camille and Dylan at the rooftop bar, holding hands, kissing. The timestamp clearly visible. 3 weeks ago. Camille's face went white. Actually white, like someone had drained the blood directly from her body. The video continued. More photos. The parking garage kiss. Hotel check-in selfies I'd found on her cloud storage that she thought was private. Text message screenshots with Dylan calling her my goddess, and her responding with heart emojis and promises. The restaurant went completely, utterly, dead silent. Becky dropped her fork. The clatter echoed. Dylan looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and die there. Jennifer, poor, innocent Jennifer, gasped audibly. Sarah stopped mid-sip of her wine, mouth hanging open. Other diners had turned to watch. Some pulled out their phones. I could see them recording. This was going to be on social media within the hour. Camille's worst nightmare. Public humiliation. Except she wasn't the one doing the humiliating anymore. The video played for 2 full minutes. Every incriminating photo. Every romantic text. Every lie she told me while I was home doing laundry and paying bills. When it ended, the screen went black. Then a single line of text appeared, white letters on black background. Happy anniversary, Camille. Wish granted. I pocketed my phone. Looked at my wife, ex-wife now, I guess, since I'd signed the papers, and smiled. A genuine, peaceful smile that came from somewhere deep inside where I'd stored 3 years of frustration and 6 months of betrayal. You wanted an unforgettable night, I said. Consider this my gift. The silence was delicious. Absolutely delicious. The silence in Maison du Loon lasted approximately 5 seconds before absolute chaos erupted. Camille stood up so fast her chair tipped backward and crashed to the floor with a sound that made every person in the restaurant jump. Her face had gone from white to red so quickly I wondered if she was having some kind of medical emergency. Spoiler alert, she wasn't. She was just experiencing the consequences of her actions in real time, which for people like Camille felt a lot like dying. You, she started, but the words wouldn't come. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, desperately trying to form sentences, but only managing to look like she was practicing silent screaming. Dylan had actually slid down in his chair, trying to make himself smaller. Difficult to do when you're 6 feet tall with a man bun that added another 3 inches, but he was giving it his best shot. His face had achieved a shade of red I didn't know human skin could produce. Somewhere between sunburn and cardiac arrest. Becky was staring at her phone, where she'd apparently pulled up the video someone had already posted to TikTok. Oh my God, she kept saying. Oh my God. Oh my God. Real vocabulary powerhouse. That Becky. A true wordsmith. Jennifer had her hand over her mouth, looking between Dylan and Camille like she was watching a tennis match in hell. Sarah had actually started crying. The whether from secondhand embarrassment or because her juice cleanse had left her emotionally unstable, I couldn't tell. The other diners were recording everything. Multiple phones pointed at our table like we were a live episode of reality TV. Which, I guess we were. Real Housewives of Broken Marriages, or whatever they'd call this disaster. You recorded us? Camille finally managed to say, her voice shaking with what I assumed was rage but could have been humiliation or possibly both mixing together into some kind of emotional cocktail. I documented evidence. I corrected. There's a difference. One sounds creepy. The other sounds smart. You had no right. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out my phone again. I had every right. Those were taken in public places. That's you and Dylan at a rooftop bar. You at the Riverside Inn. You spending $11,000 of our joint money on a Rolex for your yoga instructor boyfriend. Should I keep going? Because I have spreadsheets. Rita made me spreadsheets. At the mention of Rita's name, Camille's face did something new. Recognition. Fear. The dawning realization that I hadn't just stumbled into this moment. I'd planned it. You have a lawyer, she said flatly. I have a great lawyer. You should get her number. Except you can't, because she's mine and you're gonna need someone who specializes in losing cases. Dylan finally found his voice. It came out as a squeak. This is really uncool, man. I turned to look at him. Really look at him. The man who'd been sleeping with my wife, spending my money, living in my marriage like a parasite with good hair and flexible hamstrings. Uncool. I repeated. You're calling me uncool? You're wearing a shirt made of linen to a formal restaurant. You have a bracelet made of beads like you're at a summer camp friendship ceremony. Your last name is Breathe Deep, which I'm 90% sure isn't even real. And you're lecturing me about cool. He opened his mouth, closed it. Apparently had nothing. That's what I thought, I said. The manager appeared then, a small French man named Henri who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Monsieur, I must ask you to. I'm leaving, I said, standing up. Don't worry. The show's over. And dinner's on her. I pointed to Camille. She's got plenty of money. She's been stealing mine for 6 months. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high and my dignity intact. Behind me, I could hear Camille starting to cry. Real, ugly crying that made me feel absolutely nothing. I'd used up all my sympathy over the last 6 months while she was busy destroying us. The valet brought my car around. I tipped him $20 because he'd had to witness that disaster and deserved compensation for emotional trauma. My phone started blowing up before I even left the parking lot. Rita called first. I answered on Bluetooth. Please tell me it went exactly as planned, she said. Better, I replied. The restaurant manager's nephew posted it on TikTok. Silence. Then, you're joking. I wish I was. Check your phone. Search, divorce restaurant karma. We're trending. I heard typing on her end. Then laughter. Actual, genuine laughter that sounded like she was having trouble breathing. Oh my God, Milo. Oh my God. The title is When Hubby Serves Karma Instead of Dessert. It has 200,000 views already. How many? 200,000. In 30 minutes. This is viral. Like, actually viral. You broke the internet. By the time I got home, the video had hit 500,000 views. Captain met me at the door, tail wagging, completely oblivious to the fact that his owner had just become a social media phenomenon. I scratched behind his ears and checked my phone again. The comments were gold. Pure gold. This is how you handle a cheater. Respect. The classical music sent me. Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear navy suits and bring receipts. Dylan Breathe Deep? That's his name. She downgraded so hard. The way he just signed the papers and then dropped the bomb. Strategic king. Someone had made it into a meme already. A screenshot of my face from the video with the caption, POV, you've been planning your revenge for 6 months, and it's finally time. By midnight, every major gossip account had picked it up. By morning, it had 3 million views across multiple platforms. The local news even did a segment about it, though they blurred faces and changed names, talking about public displays of divorce drama and whether recording people without permission was legal. Spoiler, in public places, it absolutely is. Camille's Instagram, which she'd carefully curated with photos of her authentic life, and her journey to self-discovery, was getting destroyed. Every post had comments. Is this before or after you cheated on your husband? Authentic life equals authentically terrible person? Dylan called. He wants his dignity back. Oh wait, you took that too. She made everything private within 24 hours. Too late. Screenshots live forever. The internet has a longer memory than elephants and fewer forgiveness protocols. Dylan's social media disappeared entirely. His Instagram, Facebook, even his professional yoga website, all gone. Vanished into the digital void like he'd never existed. Awaken Movement with Dylan became Awaken Movement into Witness Protection Program. His yoga studio, the one where he taught enlightenment and intentional breathing to middle-aged women with too much money, posted a statement. Dylan Thompson is no longer affiliated with our practice. We wish him well on his journey. Corporate speak for, we fired him so fast he got whiplash. Becky, loyal Becky who'd been Camille's best friend since college, ghosted her faster than you could say guilty by association. Turns out when your best friend becomes internet famous for being a terrible person, friendship has limits. Who knew? Jennifer and Sarah? Also gone. Unfollowed on social media. Blocked her number. Probably burned any photos they had together in some kind of cleansing ritual. Camille tried texting me. Multiple times. We need to talk. This is insane. You're insane. You ruined my life. Please, can we just talk? I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Rita had advised against any communication that wasn't through lawyers, and for once in my life, I was taking good advice. Patricia, Camille's mother, did call though. Left a voicemail that was 10 minutes of her explaining how this was somehow my fault for not supporting Camille's growth and stifling her authentic self. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. Life's too short for Patricia's opinions. The legal fallout was even more satisfying than the social media explosion. Rita worked fast, faster than I thought possible. Within a week, everything was finalized. The house. Mine. Sole ownership. Camille had signed away her rights when she'd moved all that money fraudulently. Turns out judges really don't like it when you steal from joint accounts while framing your spouse. The car? Mine. The CRV she'd been driving around. The one I'd been making payments on while she used it to visit Dylan? I had it towed from her mother's house where she'd been staying. She called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer once. The bank accounts? Frozen initially, then divided according to what was actually fair, which meant I got back everything she'd stolen plus interest. Rita was a magician with financial law. The savings account we'd been building for a house upgrade? All mine. The retirement fund? Split properly, but I didn't lose a cent to her fraud. Dylan tried to sue me. Actually had the audacity to get a lawyer and claim defamation. His lawyer sent a cease and desist letter about the video. Rita laughed so hard when she read it that she had to put it down and compose herself. Then she sent back a response that was basically, my client documented factual events in public spaces. Your client is a public figure who teaches yoga professionally. This falls under newsworthy content. Also, truth is an absolute defense to defamation. Try again. We never heard from Dylan's lawyer after that. But my favorite part? The absolute best part of this entire disaster? Captain, the dog. Our golden retriever who'd been Switzerland during the marriage, loving both of us equally. Camille tried to claim him in the divorce. Argued that she'd been the one to pick him out at the shelter, that she'd named him Captain, that he was hers. Rita scheduled a home visit. The judge wanted to see where the dog would be living with each person. Camille was staying at her mother's apartment. Small. No yard. Patricia was allergic to dogs but dealing with it because her daughter needed support. I had the house. Fenced backyard. Dog door. Captain's entire life was in that house. But the real kicker? When Camille came to pick Captain up for the home visit, he growled at her. Actually growled. This dog who'd never shown aggression to anyone in his entire life, who'd been friendly to mailmen and squirrels, and that one time a raccoon broke into the garage. This dog looked at Camille and growled. Then he came and sat next to me, leaned against my leg, made his choice. The judge awarded me full custody. Good boy, Captain. Very good boy. 6 months after the dinner that broke the internet and my marriage simultaneously, I moved into a new apartment on the west side of the city. 14th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown. 2 bedrooms. One for me, one for an office where I could actually work without someone sighing dramatically in the background about my lack of ambition. The place came with a balcony big enough for Captain to sunbathe and judge the people walking below, which had become his favorite hobby besides eating and reminding me that I was worth more than a cheating wife and her yoga instructor boyfriend. My mornings now consisted of black coffee, the good stuff, not the cheap grocery store brand I'd been buying to save money for Camille's shopping habits, and silence. Blessed, beautiful silence. No one asking me to communicate more emotionally. No one criticizing my career choices while spending $11,000 on a Rolex for someone else. No one pretending to go to girls' night while actually going to Dylan's apartment to practice poses that definitely weren't in any yoga manual. Just me, Captain, and the view of a city that suddenly felt full of possibilities instead of obligations. The apartment came furnished with minimal effort on my part. Turns out when you're not financing someone else's affair, you have disposable income for things like couches that don't sag in the middle and kitchen appliances that actually work. I bought a TV that was bigger than necessary. Got a coffee maker that probably had more features than my car. Adopted a plant named Gerald after my old boss, because it required minimal attention and occasionally looked dead, but kept surviving anyway. Work got better too. I'd gotten a promotion 2 months after the divorce finalized, project manager to senior project manager, which came with a raise that would have made Patricia choke on her wine if she knew. Turned out when you're not emotionally exhausted from a failing marriage, You actually have energy for career advancement. Who knew? Camille tried texting once. Just once. About 3 months into my new life. Can we talk? I looked at that message for a solid minute. Thought about all the conversations we'd had over 7 years together. The good ones in the beginning, when we'd stayed up late talking about dreams and plans. The mediocre ones in the middle, when we talked about groceries and bills. The non-existent ones at the end, when she'd been too busy texting Dylan to notice I was in the same room. I replied with a link. Not to the viral video. That felt too obvious. Instead, I sent her a YouTube link to a yoga tutorial. Downward dog for beginners. Because I'm petty, but I'm creative about it. She blocked my number immediately after that. Perfect. Rita called every few weeks to check in, though our conversations had shifted from legal strategy to genuine friendship. Turned out when you go through a war together, you bond. She'd invite me to her book club sometimes. A group of lawyers who drank wine and argued about plot holes in legal thrillers. I fit right in. You should write a book, Rita said one evening after her book club had spent an hour debating whether John Grisham understood actual courtroom procedure. About the whole experience. Call it something catchy. Like what? How to stretch your patience until it snaps, she suggested, grinning. Or namaste away from my wife. I actually considered it. Maybe I would write it someday. Maybe not. For now, I was content just living it. This new chapter where I wasn't the punchline anymore. Captain walked over and dropped a tennis ball at my feet, tail wagging with the eternal optimism only dogs possess. You're right, buddy, I said, scratching behind his ears. It's a good life. He barked in agreement. Because here's the thing about revenge. Everyone says it doesn't solve anything, that it's empty and unsatisfying, that taking the high road is better. And maybe they're right. Maybe I should have just signed the papers quietly and walked away without the theatrics. But you know what? That video hit 10 million views. Camille's influencer career died harder than our marriage. Dylan's yoga studio went out of business. And I got the house, the dog, and the last laugh. So when they toasted to his new king, that night at Maison du Loon, they had no idea the real king was already sitting at the table, smiling, planning, and about to remind everyone that underestimating the quiet guy is always a mistake. Turns out I wasn't the idiot husband after all. I was just patient. And patience, as it turns out, is the best revenge you can buy.